Chapter 1, Giving Birth in July. So painful. On the bed, the woman tightly shut her eyes, letting out a cry of agony. Her slender hand gently caressed her round belly, her stunning face unable to mask the torment she was enduring, as if suffering an endless affliction. The midwives, who had been summoned in haste, revealed anxious expressions, holding scissors and hot water, moving frantically around her. Typically, women carry a pregnancy for 10 months, but who would have thought the Regent King's consort was about to give birth after only 7 months? Moreover, judging by the situation, it seemed the baby was in a breech position, further throwing the midwives into a panic. They exchanged helpless glances, unsure of what to do. The Regent King held power over the nation, and his consort hailed from a prestigious family. If anything were to happen to her, these midwives would undoubtedly face severe punishment, likely losing their heads. Thinking of the Regent King's ruthless nature, the midwives looked at one another, their hearts filled with dread. The intricately carved red rosewood door creaked open, and a woman in a red dress stepped inside. Her figure was as graceful as a willow swaying in the wind, her slender waist moving lightly, her soft and elegant demeanor stirring a sense of compassion in others. She possessed an extraordinarily beautiful face, with delicate eyebrows like distant mountains, naturally rosy lips, and her hair adorned with pearls and jewels that accentuated her enchanting, alluring charm. "How are you, dear sister? Your little sister Sophie has come to visit you," the woman in red greeted with a gentle smile, waving her hand to dismiss the midwives. Her gestures and demeanor carried the air of the Regent King's main consort, though she was currently only a concubine in the household. The woman on the bed slightly opened her eyes, her long lashes trembling as she winced in pain. Waves of sharp agony radiated from her belly, causing her to break out in a cold sweat. Beads of perspiration rolled down her forehead, testament to the excruciating pain she was enduring. Diana Lambert forced a faint smile and weakly murmured, "You are so thoughtful, little sister. Could it be that dear sister is still waiting for the Regent King to visit?" Sophie Lambert covered her mouth with a soft chuckle, her laughter as clear as tinkling silver bells. "Indeed, sister, you've been pregnant for 7 months now. I guess it's been 4 months since you last saw him, hasn't it?" Diana Lambert, drenched in sweat, suddenly lifted her head with a look of alarm. "What do you mean by that, little sister?" Although Diana and Sophie Lambert were half-sisters, Diana had always cherished and cared for Sophie. In Diana's eyes, Sophie was a gentle and obedient girl, which is why she had brought Sophie to the Regent King's residence, hoping the two sisters could rely on each other. "Do you know why the Regent King hasn't visited your chambers for so long? Even though you've been pregnant for 6 months, he hasn't paid you any attention?" Sophie Lambert smiled sweetly, her eyes sparkling mischievously. Just as Diana was about to respond, another wave of searing pain struck, causing her to furrow her brows tightly and clutch the luxurious silk bedding in her hands, crumpling it in her grasp. "Because," Sophie whispered softly into her ear, her phoenix-like eyes glinting with a cruel satisfaction reminiscent of their stepmother Evelyn Moore, "I told the Regent King that you were having an affair with Ethan Wright." Diana's eyes widened in shock, her face pale as she stared at Sophie. "You're so naive, dear sister. Did you think I came to the Regent King's residence to live under your shadow?" Sophie's voice was sweet, yet laced with venom. "You're wrong. I came here for the title of Regent King's consort." Diana Lambert gritted her teeth, her heart surging with turmoil, yet the torment from the child in her womb rendered her speechless. She could only glare with eyes brimming with hatred at the young woman before her, a woman with a refined beauty akin to a lotus flower, but a heart 100 times more venomous than a serpent. This was her dear younger sister, Sophie Lambert. Back when they lived in the manor, Sophie Lambert, though born of a concubine, possessed an extraordinary beauty. Her petite frame and delicate demeanor resembled a fragile flower swaying in the wind, evoking Diana's pity. Because of this, Diana had always shared everything with her younger sister, never imagining it would lead to such a tragic ending. The pungent scent of blood filled the air, causing Sophie Lambert to wrinkle her nose in disgust. She waved her hand, covering her mouth and nose with a handkerchief, and barked at the midwife hiding behind the intricately carved ebony screen adorned with peony patterns. "Why are you still standing there? Go assist my sister with the childbirth. If anything happens to both mother and child, you'll answer to me." The phrase both mother and child struck a tender chord in Diana Lambert's heart. She clenched her fists, her resolve hardening like never before. No, she absolutely could not let Sophie Lambert's schemes succeed. Both she and her unborn child must survive. Fueled by this unyielding determination, Diana Lambert, though physically weakened, maintained her clarity of mind. She followed the midwife's instructions, pushing with all her might. After expending every ounce of her strength, her body finally relaxed, and a sense of relief washed over her. Then, the faint cries of a newborn reached her ears. "Wah!" The baby's cries echoed, sounding like a divine melody, to Diana's ears. Despite her exhaustion, she forced her eyes open, a faint smile gracing her beautiful face. "Congratulations, Your Grace, it's a healthy baby boy." The midwife swiftly cleaned the blood off the infant, wrapping him in a soft cloth, leaving only his rosy face exposed. The baby's features were as if sculpted from jade, his skin still wrinkled but fair and delicate. His long eyelashes rested gently over his closed eyes, and his tiny lips parted to emit soft cries. Diana Lambert, entranced, reached out her hand, yearning to touch her child's tender skin. But just as her fingers were about to graze him, the baby was snatched away by a hand with crimson-painted nails. "Rest well, sister." Sophie Lambert cradled the baby, her smile insincere. "No. Give my child back." Diana Lambert felt as if lightning had struck her. The primal instinct of a mother surged within her, and she screamed, her voice filled with the anguish of a mother on the verge of collapse. Startled, Sophie Lambert quickly called out, "Alexander! What's all this noise?" A cold male voice sounded from outside the door. Moments later, a tall figure pushed the door open and entered. The man, clad in a purple robe, exuded an icy aura. He was none other than the most powerful man in the Great Hien Dynasty, the Regent King, Alexander Blackwood. He was also the man Diana Lambert had secretly admired since coming of age, the husband with whom she had vowed to share a lifetime. Though Sophie Lambert had driven a wedge between them, Alexander Blackwood remained the biological father of her child, a bond of blood that could not be severed. Diana Lambert's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope, like a drowning person clutching a lifeline. "Your Grace, please, tell her to return my child to me." "Alexander, do you even want to look at this illegitimate brat?" Sophie Lambert's seductive smile deepened as her hand gently caressed the baby, as though squeezing Diana Lambert's heart. Alexander Blackwood crossed his arms and stood watching, his expression cold and indifferent, his face devoid of emotion. "An illegitimate brat like that, why should I dirty my hands?" Diana Lambert widened her eyes in disbelief, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Your Grace, this is our child, sister, save your breath." Sophie Lambert sneered, leaning in closer. "What normal child is born prematurely at less than 7 months? It seems you were already pregnant before you married into the royal household." "You hid it well, I must say." Hearing this, Alexander Blackwood's expression grew even colder. He cast a frosty glance at the woman lying on the bed and let out a disdainful snort. "Guards, take this illegitimate child outside, beat it to death." The last 2 words were like ice, delivered with ruthless finality and devoid of any emotion. His face was as unyielding as a deity seated high above, his commands absolute and beyond challenge. Chapter 2, The Tragic Death of the Child. "No. No. My child. I am innocent." Diana Lambert wailed in anguish, her cries a mix of despair and pleading. After months of carrying her baby, a bond had formed between mother and child. To her, this infant symbolized boundless happiness and hope for the future. 2 burly guards took the baby from Sophie Lambert's hands. As if sensing the impending danger, the infant let out a piercing cry, each wail like a sharp blade stabbing into the mother's heart. Diana Lambert's face turned ashen. She threw off the silk blanket and staggered out of bed. Ignoring the blood pouring from her abdomen, she collapsed to her knees, sobbing as she begged, "This guilty woman, Diana Lambert, admits her sins, but the child is innocent." "Please, your grace, have mercy and spare its life." In truth, she had committed no crime. Yet in this dire moment, to save her child, she had no choice but to confess to a sin she did not commit, hoping Alexander Blackwood would show compassion and spare the baby. Seeing her finally admit guilt, a fleeting, unreadable emotion flickered in the depths of the man's dark eyes. Yet, his voice remained cold as he declared, "The dignity of the royal family cannot be sullied. This is the price you pay for your betrayal." With that, he turned and swept out of the room. His towering figure, though tinged with a trace of desolation, moved with unwavering resolve, crushing Diana Lambert's heart with every step. Outside, the heavy sound of a whip cracking echoed through the air. The baby's once clear cries gradually weakened, each sob softer than the last, until they ceased entirely. The silence that followed was like a blade tearing through Diana Lambert's soul. Sophie Lambert lazily raised her hand. "Rose Carter, aren't you going to bring my dear sister's child over here already?" Diana Lambert stared in shock at her closest maidservant, the one she trusted the most, Rose Carter, obediently acting like a servant to Sophie Lambert. Her anger surged uncontrollably. "Since when did you plant Rose Carter by my side?" She had wholeheartedly trusted Rose Carter, treating her as a sister and sharing everything with her, only to be betrayed so cruelly. How pitiful she felt. "Wasn't it 6 months ago, when you were pregnant, that Rose Carter herself recommended me to you?" Sophie Lambert's words pulled her back to the memories of half a year ago. At that time, Diana Lambert had just discovered her pregnancy, and Rose Carter had advised her, "Men often stray when their wives are expecting, and the Regent King is likely no exception. How could we let someone else steal your favor, my lady?" Rose Carter's deceitful yet seemingly loyal and devoted voice still echoed in her ears, "My lady, you should invite the third miss into the estate. Blood is thicker than water, and sisters can rely on each other. This will also help secure your position in the royal household." Thinking of this, Diana Lambert's eyes turned red with fury as she screamed, "Rose Carter, I've treated you well, haven't I? Why would you betray me?" Rose Carter, her face devoid of emotion, cradled the baby that had turned into a bloody mess. Calmly, she replied, "The third miss promised me that if I helped her overthrow you, she would let me become the Regent King's concubine." Alexander Blackwood, a man of unparalleled grace and power, commanding influence over the court and the wilds alike, was cold and arrogant yet the dream of countless women. It seemed even Rose Carter had fallen for his charm. Sophie Lambert chimed in, her smile as radiant as a blooming flower. "Sister, did you enjoy the purple sweet potato, red bean, and quick seed porridge that Rose Carter so diligently prepared for you recently? What are you scheming now?" Diana Lambert asked, both horrified and enraged. The sweet and chewy quick seed porridge had indeed been her favorite, something she had eaten almost daily as breakfast. "For someone so well-read and knowledgeable, sister, it's a pity you didn't know that quick seeds are cooling in nature and can easily cause a miscarriage," Sophie Lambert said, looking down at her with a triumphant smirk. "Only by making you miscarry could I convince the Regent King that you had an affair with another man. It seems my little whispers in his ear worked perfectly. He now fully believes in your affair with Ethan Wright. You're truly despicable." Diana Lambert was so furious that her vision blurred, she wanted nothing more than to tear apart that exquisitely beautiful face. To her, Sophie Lambert had always seemed as delicate as morning dew, yet who could have imagined her schemes ran so deep and insidious? Beneath that gentle, water-like exterior lay a venomous and cruel heart. My mother, where is she?" Diana Lambert weakly asked, her voice trembling with desperation. "Naturally, she was tortured to death by me and my mother. That weak Rivers woman, how could someone like her ever shoulder the responsibilities of being the matriarch of the Lambert estate?" Hearing Sophie Lambert's words, Diana felt her head buzz, her eyes turning bloodshot. After marrying into the Regent King's residence, her mother had suddenly died under mysterious circumstances, and in the end, Evelyn Moore, Sophie Lambert's mother, had been elevated to the position of the main wife. The death of her biological mother had left Diana crying herself to sleep every night, consumed by unbearable grief. She had no idea that all of it had been orchestrated by Sophie Lambert in secret. If not for that, how could my mother have become the main wife of the Grand General's residence? Sophie Lambert laughed smugly, but the curve of her eyes sent chills down one's spine. Do you remember the day you were practicing calligraphy in your room, dear sister? Her almond-shaped eyes narrowed, her voice so sweet it was terrifying. How could Diana Lambert forget? That was also the last day she saw Alexander Blackwood. At the time, she was about 3 months pregnant, fully absorbed in practicing her calligraphy in the room. The strokes of elegant floral small regular script already carry 7 parts of Lady Way's essence. He had embraced her from behind, noticing the inkstone, the fine brush, and the water that was neither too full nor too shallow, and had praised her with a smile. She had responded, "This was a gift from teacher Ethan Wright when I was still at home." Alexander Blackwood's expression had instantly darkened, his sharp eyes like those of a hawk. Without saying another word, he had turned and left. Ha ha ha. Sophie Lambert wiped away tears of laughter, her face full of mockery. Dear sister, how naive of you to mention another man's name in front of the Regent King. It was practically a courting disaster. Someone as proud as the Regent King could never tolerate such a thing. And with a little instigation from me, things turned out as they did. If your fate is so tragic, you have only your own foolishness to blame. Diana Lambert's eyes were filled with hatred. Having just lost her flesh and blood, the pain was unbearable, worse than death itself. To make matters worse, she had to endure Sophie Lambert's smug demeanor right in front of her, which only deepened her boundless resentment. If I survive, she vowed, I will skin you alive and tear you apart. Sophie Lambert's eyes shimmered like autumn water as she smiled charmingly, but within that smile lay an infinite chill. Sister, do you think, after all I've said, I would still let you live? She leaned in, gripping Diana Lambert's jaw tightly, forcing her to open her crimson lips, and sneered coldly, pour the medicine for me. Rose Carter obeyed, pouring the bowl of icy brown liquid into Diana's mouth. As soon as the liquid entered her stomach, Diana Lambert felt as though her internal organs were being ripped apart. Her entire body turned icy cold, the pain reaching its peak, and she spat out a mouthful of black blood. Aren't you afraid my father will find out about my death? Sophie Lambert revealed a look of disgust, stepping aside as if avoiding contamination. Then, as if suddenly recalling something important, her eyes gleamed with a sharp, icy light. It seems I forgot to tell you, sister. The Duke just left in a huff to investigate the Lambert estate. By now, all 300 members of the Lambert household are likely already on the execution platform. That includes the criminal Edward Lambert. Chapter 3, Sacrificing Family for Justice. Diana Lambert widened her eyes in shock, gasping as she hurriedly said, even if you hold resentment against my mother, our father loved and protected us wholeheartedly. When did he ever mistreat you? Yet you cruelly assisted Alexander Blackwood in killing him. The Lambert estate was where she was born and raised, her attachment to it deeply rooted. The Lambert estate belonged to the Grand General, her father, Edward Lambert, renowned as the mighty Grand General, whose illustrious military exploits safeguarded every inch of the Great Hien Dynasty's land, bringing about the prosperity they enjoyed today. And now, Alexander Blackwood dared to discard the hunting dog once the rabbit was caught. Sophie Lambert sneered coldly. Father? We're both his daughters, yet he favored you, arranging for you to marry Alexander as his official wife, while I was sent off to marry the heir of Marquis Bright Sunday. The treatment between us is worlds apart. You beast. Diana Lambert's face was filled with disbelief as she gritted her teeth, her heart brimming with contempt for Sophie Lambert. Better to be the wife of a poor man than a concubine in a wealthy household. You were given the honorable position of the heir's wife, yet you refuse it and instead wish to become a concubine in the Regent King's estate? All of father's efforts for you were wasted. Sophie Lambert remained indifferent, her tone icy as she said, the so-called loyal Edward Lambert may have achieved great military feats, but he harbored ambition, deliberately concealing his strength. He undoubtedly planned to rebel. Knowing that loyalty and righteousness cannot coexist, I, Sophie Lambert, could only act in the name of justice for the stability of the Great Hien Dynasty, even if it meant sacrificing my own bloodline. Hearing such shameless words, Diana Lambert trembled with rage, her chest aching. Her mother, her father, her beloved Lambert estate, everything she cherished, had been destroyed by the venomous woman standing before her. If I don't make you endure pain 1,000 times worse than mine, I, Diana Lambert, swear I am no longer human. She glared fiercely, her breaths growing faint, her once beautiful eyes wide open, refusing to close even in death. Suddenly, she heard a sharp voice ring out, "Someone, the princess has died in childbirth, and the baby in her womb also perished. If I survive, I will skin you alive and tear you apart." The woman lying on the soft bed groaned softly, suddenly opening her eyes, her dark pupils burning with a hatred etched deep into her soul. At that moment, two familiar faces appeared before her, Ivy Clark and Rose Carter. Seeing her awake, both were overjoyed and rushed to the bedside, repeatedly calling, "Mistress, mistress." "Ivy Clark?" Diana Lambert, still drowning in the sorrow of losing her child, was stunned when she saw the beautiful Ivy Clark standing before her. In her memory, Ivy Clark had died when she was 16, humiliated by others. Yet now, she stood alive before her. Could it be that after being forced to drink the poisonous concoction by Sophie Lambert, she had descended into the underworld to reunite with Ivy Clark? Her gaze swept over Rose Carter, who stood nearby. Diana Lambert's expression darkened as she coldly said, "How dare you show your face to me?" Ivy Clark and Rose Carter exchanged glances. Finally, Ivy Clark mustered her courage and timidly asked, "Mistress, could it be that you've just woken up in a delirium or had a nightmare, not even recognizing your servants and Rose Carter?" Diana Lambert suddenly realized something was amiss. Rose Carter's face appeared much younger than she remembered, with a hint of youthful innocence. Meanwhile, Ivy Clark looked healthy, her complexion rosy, nothing like a ghost. Diana Lambert lowered her gaze to her own body. Her stomach was flat and slender, no longer heavy with pregnancy. Her waist was slim and supple, like a young willow branch, clearly the figure of a girl in her early 20s. "What year is it now?" "The era, the emperor, tell me everything." Diana Lambert grabbed Ivy Clark's sleeve and urgently questioned. Ivy Clark dared not delay. After thinking for a moment, she respectfully replied, "It is now the Hien Yuan dynasty, the first year after Emperor Jing ascended the throne. However, the one truly holding power over the land is the Regent King." Diana Lambert's hands trembled slightly, her eyes filled with disbelief. Heaven had shown mercy. Pitying her unfulfilled vengeance, it had sent Diana Lambert back to when she was only 14. At that time, she was still a sheltered maiden, unaware of the complexities of love, and had yet to meet the man who would occupy her thoughts day and night. Thinking of Alexander Blackwood, a flicker of light appeared in Diana Lambert's eyes. "How long until the peony banquet?" she asked. "Mistress still remembers the peony banquet?" Ivy Clark sighed in relief. "It's 3 days away." 3 days, only 3 days left? Diana Lambert murmured, her expression dazed. The peony banquet was hosted by the Marchioness of Bright Sun to celebrate the blooming of double-petaled peonies in her garden. The Marchioness, a titled noblewoman beloved by many, had invited numerous young talents and noble ladies to attend. On the surface, it was a flower-viewing event, but in reality, it was a matchmaking gathering. When she was 14, it was at the peony banquet that she first met Alexander Blackwood and fell deeply in love with him. She even pleaded with her father to grant their union. She once believed he was her destined partner, only to be betrayed and wronged in the end by Sophie Lambert, leading to her unjust death. Thinking of her tiny child, now reduced to nothing more than a vague mass of flesh, Diana Lambert nearly shed tears. She quickly waved her hand. "Ivy Clark, Rose Carter, both of you leave for now." Hearing her command, the two hurriedly retreated, and the sound of the door closing echoed. Only then did she bury her face in her quilt, sobbing uncontrollably. When her tears were spent, and all the resentment in her heart had been poured out, she raised her tear-streaked face and declared with hatred, "Those who owe me, I will make them pay, piece by piece. Whether it's Sophie Lambert, Rose Carter, or even her stepmother Evelyn Moore, who schemed from the shadows, they will all repay what they owe her one day. At the peony banquet that year, her beloved flying stream zither had all its strings broken. Unable to resonate with any other instrument, she lost to Sophie Lambert's jade flute performance, allowing Sophie to claim the title of the most talented woman in the capital. Thinking back now, it was likely all orchestrated by Sophie Lambert. The woman had planted Rose Carter by her side as a spy, making any underhanded scheme effortless. But now that she had been reborn, she would not repeat her mistakes. She would not allow Sophie Lambert to steal the glory that rightfully belonged to her. With her preparations in place, she would protect her flying stream zither at all costs. Moments later, Diana Lambert, her eyes red from crying, pushed open the door and said to Ivy Clark, who was waiting outside, "Come and do my makeup. I want to go to the music room." "Yes." Ivy Clark stepped in, her hands moving deftly. In no time, she had tied Diana's hair into a double bun and helped her change into a green outfit. Together, they headed to the music room. "Why isn't Miss Rose Carter accompanying you today, my lady? Normally, you and she are so close." Ivy Clark fidgeted the entire way and finally couldn't hold back her question. The corners of Diana Lambert's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Ivy Clark, you and Rose Carter have served me since childhood. You've seen how well I treat her, haven't you?" "Of course, my lady," Ivy Clark nodded eagerly. "You are always so kind to the servants, never harsh or scolding. Whenever there's something delicious or rare, you always reward the two of us first. Thanks to you, we live in comfort and luxury, treated even better than the palace maids." Diana Lambert let out a bitter laugh. But Rose Carter is still not satisfied. "What else can I do?" Chapter 4, A Meeting in the Music Room. She believed she had treated Rose Carter with utmost sincerity, only to be betrayed so cruelly. Now, every time she saw Rose Carter, painful memories resurfaced, filling her heart with hatred. How could she allow such a person to remain by her side? It would be no different from inviting a wolf into her home. "What's wrong with Rose Carter?" Ivy Clark asked, her face full of confusion. Diana Lambert replied coldly, "She has long since secretly pledged allegiance to another master. From now on, don't treat her with sincerity, or she'll exploit you for information." "Yes, I understand." Ivy Clark quickly covered her mouth, catching the deeper meaning in her mistress's words, and dared not inquire further. Diana Lambert's eyes flickered as a memory of Ivy Clark's death surfaced in her mind. It was a few days before her marriage. Her mother had instructed her to bring only one close maid with her to the Regent King's residence, to avoid being accused of arrogance as the daughter of the Lambert family. At the time, she was torn between Ivy Clark and Rose Carter, both loyal and devoted maids. But later, Ivy Clark had gone out to buy sewing supplies and caught the attention of a thug. Humiliated and devastated, she had hanged herself. After that tragic incident, Diana Lambert had no choice but to take Rose Carter with her. As she recalled the past, the events remained vividly clear in her mind. Diana Lambert sighed inwardly, this must have been Rose Carter's doing. Her scheming is truly terrifying, sending chills down one's spine. Back then, Rose Carter had only been 18 years old, yet her heart was already so malicious. At the time, Diana and Ivy Clark had been as close as sisters. It seemed she needed to stay vigilant. If she wasn't careful and fell into Rose Carter's trap, she might end up utterly ruined. Lost in thought, she suddenly realized the music room was now in sight. "Miss, the music room has arrived," Ivy Clark reminded softly, pulling her back from her thoughts as she gazed at the elegant villa before her. The Lambert estate, residence of the Prime Minister, boasted a music room far more spacious than that of ordinary households. The room was airy, immaculate, and housed several rare and exquisite instruments. Diana Lambert, familiar with the path, stepped into the room. Inside, a man was already present, clad in white as pure as snow, his features gentle and refined like jade, his serene eyes glimmering with a faint smile. This exceptionally graceful man was none other than Ethan Wright, the Lambert estate's renowned music tutor. "Why is Master Wright here?" Diana asked, her voice tinged with surprise. "Miss Lambert seems to be in high spirits. Have you come to play the zither?" Ethan Wright lifted his gaze slightly, his soft and delicate features causing Diana's heart to tighten unexpectedly. In her past life, due to Sophie Lambert's instigations, Alexander Blackwood had misunderstood her relationship with Ethan Wright, leading to his cold indifference towards her and ultimately resulting in her tragic demise. Beneath her sleeves, Diana's 10 fingers slowly clenched into fists, her sharp nails digging into her palms, leaving faint red marks on her delicate skin. A fleeting chill passed through her eyes. "Miss Lambert?" Ethan Wright's gentle voice carried a hint of surprise as his elegant brows furrowed slightly. Snapping out of her reverie, Diana replied with a composed yet layered tone, "No, how about you play a piece, Master Wright? My skills are all thanks to your teaching, I wouldn't dare to show off before the expert." Ethan Wright smiled faintly. "Miss Lambert is too modest, though your talent truly surpasses the master." Adjusting his attire, he walked leisurely to the zither, sat down, and smiled again. "Then allow me to play a tune." Though her emotions were in turmoil, Diana couldn't help but be drawn in by his words. Bathed in backlight, the man in white sat upright, his black hair tied simply with a ribbon, exuding an elegance akin to a celestial being. His slender, fair fingers, each exquisitely shaped, were even more beautiful than those of a woman. Those hands alone were like a work of art, captivating all who beheld them. With a soft ding, a jade-like fingertip lightly plucked a string. The delicate string trembled, producing a clear and melodious sound. The music was ethereal and pure, as if echoing from the celestial realms of Jiaoqi, enchanting all who listened. Just a gentle pluck of the strings was enough to dispel all of Diana Lambert's worries and sorrows. The deep-seated hatred in her heart began to fade away. Her heart, once burdened with resentment, suddenly became as serene as the surface of a spring lake. A short melody continued to play, like a soft spring breeze passing by, or a light autumn drizzle, purer and more elegant than even the famed high mountains and flowing water. The melody, like the one playing it, was utterly captivating. The gentle sound of the instrument filled the small room, prompting Diana Lambert to close her eyes halfway. Her long lashes drooped slightly, veiling the sorrow buried deep within her gaze. The music flowed like a ceaseless trickling stream, like an eternal life force. Though it was merely an introduction, it carried an enchanting power that stirred the soul. She had learned to play from him, yet she could never match the natural fluidity imbued in this melody. After a while, the music gradually faded, and a clear male voice rang out from afar, "Seeing your melancholy, I played this piece for you. This piece is called Reincarnation." The man's voice gradually faded with the wind, and the melodious sound of the zither resumed. The tune seemed to carry countless vivid imagery, flowing gracefully like drifting clouds and running water, soothing and pleasant to the ear. Within that harmonious melody, countless memories suddenly surged, pulling Diana Lambert into an endless stream of recollections. The piece, named Reincarnation, seemed to guide her through a cycle of life, past lives, the present, a blend of illusion and reality, lingering all around her. Scenes of her turbulent past life surfaced. A peach blossom forest in full bloom appeared before her eyes, where she encountered a young man dressed in a dark green embroidered robe. From that moment, her mind was in turmoil, her soul unsettled. "Father, do you know who he is?" "He is the most powerful man of the Dai Hien Dynasty. The entire realm is in his hands. His name is Alexander Blackwood. Do not provoke him. I must marry him." Back then, her words were naive, spoken with the innocence of youth, unaware of the complexities of the world. Pure and carefree, she clung to the idea of love at first sight with unwavering determination. Her father, who doted on her deeply, went to great lengths to fulfill her wish. Yet she failed to understand the human heart, betrayed her father's expectations, and brought Sophie Lambert, a venomous snake, into her life. From that moment, she was relentlessly harmed day and night. In her previous life, she met a tragic end. In this life, she vowed to utterly destroy Sophie Lambert. The sound of the zither continued to flow like running water, its melody rising and falling, narrating the bitterness and sweetness, the warmth and coldness of life. As the music gradually softened, Diana Lambert opened her eyes. Her clear gaze shimmered with faint tears, but soon after, a sharp light flickered within them. She smiled gently. This melody belongs only to the heavens, how rare it is for mortals to hear it even once. This was no empty flattery. Perhaps no earthly tune could ever make her relive the cycle of life and death, stirring emotions so profound that they brought her to the verge of tears. Diana Lambert's life had been divided by the boundary of life and death into two parts. Her previous life and this one, as if predestined, were deeply intertwined with her existence. Yet in her past life, she had died, and what stood before her now, clad in green robes, was Ethan Wright, the Grand Lady. Her heart steadied, as if awakened, and she spoke, truly a remarkable piece. 1,000 listeners would each hear 1,000 different melodies, tied to their own states of mind and life experiences. It has indeed provided me with much inspiration. Chapter 5, A Melody of Reincarnation. Ethan Wright pondered for a moment, then smiled and said, "That's right. This melody was something I composed on a whim after observing the blooming and withering of flowers, the swirling and dissipating clouds in the peach garden. It embodies the essence of my life's work. No one has ever heard this piece before. This is its very first performance since I created it." "Diana is truly enlightened," she said softly, a faint smile playing on her lips, her dimples flickering in and out. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration flashed through her mind. "In 3 days, it will be the peony banquet. Have you considered showcasing your talent there, sir?" "Never. I, Ethan, am merely a humble educator at present and dare not attend such a grand occasion," Ethan Wright replied with a somewhat helpless smile. Diana Lambert raised her head, her eyes filled with earnestness as she gazed intently at him, unblinking, utterly focused. Yet, at this moment, her thoughts raced like lightning. She did not trust many people. In this household, only her parents and Ivy Clark held her confidence. Yet, the man before her felt like a kindred spirit, a confidant. Could she truly entrust her cherished flying stream zither to Ethan Wright? She clenched her hands tightly, her voice clear and resolute. "Sir Ethan, can I trust you?" In this moment, Diana Lambert was placing a significant gamble. She was staking Ethan Wright's character as her wager, and the bet itself was none other than her most beloved flying stream zither. If she won, she would shine brilliantly at the peony banquet. If she lost, Sophie Lambert would claim all the glory. But then again, would she lose? Diana Lambert gazed at Ethan Wright, her white attire resembling a serene ink painting, her black and white eyes radiating determination. The young man looked deeply at her, their eyes meeting in the air, as if they were immersed in each other's gaze. After a moment, he nodded slightly. "If the lady is willing to form an alliance, I, Ethan, humbly accept." "Very well. Then I shall entrust this flying stream zither to you, sir." Diana Lambert stood up, cradling the flying stream zither in her arms. The curved body of the zither brought a fleeting trace of reluctance to her expression. The flying stream zither had been with her for many years. Since she began learning to play at the age of 10, she and the instrument had become one. When it was secretly damaged by someone, she was heartbroken. Now, with a chance to save the zither from further harm, she was naturally overjoyed. "This is..." Ethan Wright appeared slightly surprised. Normally, when he taught Diana Lambert how to play, she always treated the zither as a precious treasure. Why would she hand it over to him today? Diana Lambert smiled bitterly. "The flying stream zither is my most cherished instrument, which has inevitably stirred jealousy within the household. The peony banquet is approaching, and I fear someone might deliberately damage it within the next 3 days. Today, I entrust the zither to you, sir, and I hope you can bring it back to me on the day of the banquet." She bowed respectfully. "Diana expresses her heartfelt gratitude to you, sir." Ethan Wright's expression turned serious, and he replied slowly, "Very well. Only then did Diana Lambert breathe a sigh of relief. She turned and placed an ordinary jade zither in the spot where the flying stream zither had been, a glint of resolve flashing in her eyes. Her intuition told her that, given Sophie Lambert's meticulous nature, she would send a servant to cut the strings of the zither. As the flying stream zither had always been kept in the innermost room of the music chamber and was admired for its beauty, the ordinary maids and servants had never seen it up close. How could they distinguish between a fine zither and a common one? Only by doing this could she avoid alerting Sophie Lambert, leading her to mistakenly believe that the flying stream zither had already been ruined. As for Diana Lambert, she would bring the exquisite and authentic flying stream zither to shine brilliantly at the peony banquet. Regarding her musical talent, she had absolute confidence. Ethan Wright smiled faintly, as elegant as a breeze. "I look forward to seeing you amaze everyone at the peony banquet, my lady." Diana Lambert smiled and nodded, then respectfully bowed and said, "Having had the privilege to enjoy such a marvelous melody from you, and now entrusting the flying stream zither to you as I wished, I shall take my leave." "Very well." Ethan Wright watched her figure as she turned and left, his gaze gentle. The elegant man, serene as a lotus flower, remained seated, much like a lotus that is near the mud but remains unstained. Stepping out of the music chamber, the sky gradually brightened. Dawn had arrived, and the soft morning light spread across the land. The early breeze carried a refreshing coolness, and the azure sky resembled a flawless jade. Ivy Clark had been waiting outside the door for a long time and hurriedly stepped forward, her small footsteps following closely behind Diana. "Where does my lady wish to go?" Diana Lambert's gaze momentarily froze. "To mother's chambers." "The madam will surely be overjoyed to know how filial you are, my lady." "The second miss often visits the madam to pay her respects. The master has praised her many times for it," Ivy Clark murmured incessantly, trailing half a step behind. At the mention of second miss, Diana Lambert's eyes instantly turned cold. Indeed, Sophie Lambert used to frequently visit her mother, leading Diana to mistakenly believe that her younger sister was genuinely devoted and filial. She had even harbored some goodwill toward her. But now, in hindsight, it was nothing but crocodile tears, a hypocritical act, deceitful to the core. It had been less than a month since Diana married into the Regent King's residence, when her mother was poisoned to death through the schemes of Sophie Lambert and that wicked concubine. They spread rumors claiming her mother had succumbed to a severe illness. Plunging Diana into unbearable grief, her heart shattered into pieces. Her mother had always been in good health, yet on the very night Diana entered the palace, she suddenly passed away. At the time, Diana had no suspicions, but now, reflecting on it, it was undoubtedly the doing of Sophie Lambert and her vile mother. Recalling the past, Diana Lambert's hatred for Sophie Lambert and her mother burned fiercely. She clenched her teeth, her fury reaching the heavens. With a cold glance, she strode swiftly toward Harmony Hall courtyard. Harmony Hall courtyard was where the Madam, Margaret Rivers, resided. The place was not lavish or extravagant, but exuded a serene and classic beauty. Rock gardens, trickling streams, and lush greenery blended harmoniously, creating an atmosphere rich in timeless elegance. Returning to this familiar place, Diana Lambert's heart surged with countless emotions. As she stepped into the courtyard, she heard a clear, melodious laugh like silver bells, accompanied by the gentle voice of a young girl blending harmoniously with the calm tone of an older woman. Diana Lambert's throat tightened, as if gripped by an invisible hand. Her dark eyes widened, a mix of hatred and joy swirling within them. She felt joy because her mother was safe and sound. But she harbored hatred for that soft, melodious laughter, the laughter of Sophie Lambert. The girl who had caused her immense suffering in her past life was now laughing so happily. How could she not hate her? Consumed by overwhelming hatred, Diana Lambert wanted nothing more than to rush forward and plunge a knife straight into Sophie Lambert's chest, avenging the theft of her husband and the murder of her child. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to suppress the storm of emotions raging within her. No, Sophie Lambert could not die just yet. How could that woman die so easily? If Diana didn't make her live a life worse than death, how could she ever ease the injustice of her past life? Diana Lambert stepped into the courtyard, her gaze icy and devoid of warmth. The eldest lady is here. Aunt Lou, with her sharp eyes, immediately noticed her and called out cheerfully. Diana. Sister. Two voices rang out simultaneously. The gentlewoman seated on the chair smiled kindly at her, while Sophie Lambert stood beside her, her face alight with joy, creating a scene of warmth and harmony. Chapter 6, A Reunion with Sophie Lambert. Looking at Sophie Lambert in her peach-pink embroidered gown, she was instantly reminded of the woman in a similar pastel outfit who had caused her child's death. Sophie Lambert's radiant, flower-like smile appeared utterly detestable at this moment. Her eyes locked onto Sophie Lambert's beautiful face, brimming with hatred. That sharp, piercing gaze made Sophie Lambert feel as if she were sitting on pins and needles. Pouting with an air of innocence, Sophie said sweetly, "What's wrong, sister? Why are you staring at me like that?" Her honeyed voice, to her, sounded chillingly cold and sinister. Having lived another life and carrying the memories of her past, she found Sophie Lambert even more terrifying now. A mere 13-year-old girl, yet already possessing such masterful acting skills, feigning purity so convincingly that everyone believed her to be unruly and impulsive. Diana Lambert suppressed the hatred bubbling within her, ignoring Sophie Lambert entirely. She merely let out a cold snort before approaching her mother. Without hesitation, she sat down on her right side and said in a warm tone, "Lou Mama, I'd like some abalone and bird's nest porridge. Make sure it's delicious." "Of course, I'll prepare it right away for the eldest young lady," Lou Mama replied with a gentle smile, pouring her a cup of fragrant tea. Diana Lambert took a small sip and immediately remarked, "It's too bitter." Margaret Rivers chuckled, feigning a playful scold, "You rarely visit my room. Why are you here today?" "Mother, you're so biased, always letting my younger sister visit," Diana Lambert teased with a playful smile, pretending to complain while casually glancing at Sophie Lambert. Sophie Lambert, though charming and adorable, had a subtle glint of resentment in her gentle eyes. After all, she was only 13 years old, her acting wasn't flawless. The fleeting unease in her gaze betrayed the bitterness in her heart. Why wasn't she, Sophie Lambert, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's household, Diana Lambert? Relying solely on her status as the legitimate daughter, she is arrogant and willful, getting whatever she desires. She opens her mouth to demand abalone, shark fin, bird's nest, and other delicacies, while Sophie has to carefully calculate even for a simple meal of fish and meat. Originally, Sophie Lambert was chatting happily with the madam, but the moment Diana Lambert arrived, everyone immediately surrounded her. Diana Lambert shone like the moon among stars, while Sophie stood isolated and lonely. Sophie's heart was filled with resentment. She and Diana Lambert were both daughters of the Prime Minister's household, so why was there such a vast difference between them? A trace of hatred quietly sprouted within her. Two eyes from the right clung to Diana Lambert like a shadow, filled with malice and envy. This made Diana Lambert smirk coldly, the corners of her lips curving into a meaningful smile. "Sophie Lambert, are you jealous now? What a pity, this luxurious room will never belong to you. I, Diana Lambert, having lived a second life, will never allow you to steal what is rightfully mine. You, in this lifetime, will always remain a concubine's daughter, destined to live humbly beneath my rightful status." Sophie Lambert's eyes shifted as she gently said, "Sister, your dress is truly beautiful. It must be made from the finest silk, with such exquisite embroidery. Look at the plum blossom patterns, so lifelike. Though my wardrobe holds many outfits, none can compare to this one of yours." Her veiled words caused Diana Lambert's expression to darken slightly. She scrutinized her good younger sister before her. Draped in soft pink attire, with light makeup enhancing her delicate appearance, Sophie Lambert's youthful face already hinted at the makings of a beauty. She was only 13, yet her heart was already brimming with schemes and cunning. Today, Diana Lambert wore a cross-collared robe embroidered with blue plum blossoms, paired with a pale green silk skirt that trailed to the ground. Her snow-white complexion further accentuated her elegance and beauty, presenting a truly graceful, gentle, and poised appearance. The fabric of her attire was undoubtedly top-quality silk, soft and smooth to the touch, and thanks to the exquisite craftsmanship of the embroiderers, it garnered admiration from many noble ladies. Sophie Lambert's earlier remark was, in fact, an insinuation about the strictness of Margaret Rivers, the matron of the household, toward the secondary daughters of the family. High-quality clothing was reserved for the legitimate daughters, while the secondary daughters were not afforded the same treatment. In the Great Hien Dynasty, the most valued virtues were maternal kindness and filial piety. If the matron of a household failed to be fair, just, tolerant, and compassionate, she would undoubtedly face relentless criticism. For an esteemed lady of a noble family, being involved in such a scandal was akin to courting disgrace and even the threat of dismissal. Sophie Lambert's words had effectively pushed Margaret Rivers into a precarious position. However, how could Diana Lambert allow her mother to fall into disrepute? Her eyes gleamed as she smiled and said, "Mother is the most magnanimous person. If my younger sister likes, I will send 2 sets of Hangzhou silk garments to her room another day." However, there is naturally a distinction between legitimate and secondary daughters. The expenses and attire of the legitimate line are meant to surpass those of the secondary line. Our Lambert household is considered a prestigious family. If legitimate and secondary daughters were to dress the same, wouldn't it invite ridicule from others? Her words were clear and confident, each sentence reasonable and well justified. Margaret Rivers, seated above, smiled and nodded, her expression full of satisfaction and pride for having such a capable daughter. However, these words struck Sophie Lambert like a blow, causing her face to twist in displeasure. Her expression shifted repeatedly, betraying the discontent in her heart. Within the Lambert household, the members were few, and Edward Lambert had only 2 daughters, Diana Lambert and Sophie Lambert. Thus, the distinction between legitimate and secondary daughters was not particularly pronounced. Moreover, Diana Lambert, this so-called fool, had always acted as if she and Sophie Lambert shared a deep sisterly bond. Why, then, had she spoken such sharp words today, leaving Sophie with no way to gracefully retreat? Sophie Lambert's complexion shifted continuously before she finally forced a strained smile. "What elder sister said is not wrong. It's good that you understand," Diana Lambert replied. Having experienced life and death, her perspective far surpassed that of the 13-year-old Sophie Lambert. Having tasted the vicissitudes of life and the warmth and coldness of the world, Diana had long since mastered the art of concealing her emotions. She also deeply understood the principles of navigating life within a prominent family. The petty schemes of Sophie Lambert were nothing more than child's play in her eyes. Her deep, lake-like gaze rested on Sophie Lambert, and the corners of her lips curved slightly. "I hope you won't disappoint Mother's goodwill. I'd hate to hear outsiders gossiping that the Lambert household mistreats its concubine-born daughters." When Sophie Lambert's eyes met Diana's, she was startled by the depth of those dark, profound eyes, and a chill surged in her heart. Possessing such cold and penetrating eyes, was this still the naive, innocent, and unworldly Diana Lambert of the past? Under that intense gaze, Sophie Lambert stammered as she nodded. "Elder sister, what are you saying? With the first wife managing the Lambert household, even a concubine-born daughter like me is treated well. Surely no one would dare spread baseless rumors behind our backs." Chapter 7, The Strategy of Retreating to Advance. Diana Lambert pursed her lips into a smile, her rosy lips forming a beautiful curve in the air. "You should remember today's words carefully, little sister." Sophie Lambert lowered her head, her long lashes casting shadows to conceal the malice brimming in her eyes. "Oh my, the Apollonian bird's nest porridge is ready." Madame Moore cheerfully carried in a porcelain bowl with a delicate green glaze, the fragrant aroma making everyone's stomachs rumble. Diana Lambert momentarily set aside her quarrel with Sophie Lambert, reverting to her innocent, girlish demeanor as she coquettishly said, "Madame Moore, I want to eat." Madame Moore placed the bowl in front of her, holding a jade spoon and chopsticks, attending to her with utmost care. "Thank you, Madame Moore." Diana Lambert flashed a sweet, radiant smile before scooping a small spoonful to her lips. Ah, too hot. Margaret Rivers scolded her gently, you impatient girl, blow on it to cool it down before eating, or you'll burn your tongue. Watching the warm affection between mother and daughter, Sophie Lambert clenched her handkerchief tightly, twisting it until it was wrinkled and crumpled. Babylonian bird's nest porridge, no matter where, it was a luxurious delicacy. As the illegitimate daughter, she had no fortune to enjoy such fine cuisine. The alluring aroma wafted into her nose, making her frown as she stared intently at Diana Lambert's bowl of porridge. Diana Lambert let out a cold smile. As expected of the illegitimate daughter, just like her birth mother, completely lacking in decorum. She raised her chin arrogantly, her indifferent expression exuding nobility. Would you like to taste it, little sister? Well, Sophie Lambert swallowed hard. After all, she was still a child and couldn't resist nodding in the end, her gloomy expression brightening. Then thank you, elder sister. Diana Lambert picked up a small porcelain bowl, placed a piece of abalone in it, and let a faint cold smile flicker at the corner of her lips, hidden beneath her lowered lashes. She gently pushed the bowl toward Sophie Lambert. Sophie reached out to take it, but unexpectedly, Diana Lambert's wrist trembled slightly, causing the delicately painted lotus-patterned porcelain bowl to fall to the ground. The sharp sound of crash echoed, making everyone's expressions change. The hot soup splashed onto the back of Sophie Lambert's foot, seeping through the thin fabric of her embroidered shoes, causing her pain. Just as she was about to speak, Diana Lambert's piercing voice cut her off. What do you mean by this, younger sister? I kindly offered you the soup, yet you deliberately let the bowl fall. Are you perhaps jealous of me? From clothing to food, do you think mother has treated you unfairly, so you hold a grudge and act out on purpose? Though a woman, Diana Lambert, born into a military family, carried an air of arrogance. At this moment, her loud reprimand fully displayed the demeanor of an elder sister. Hearing this, even Margaret Rivers, who was usually gentle and kind, furrowed her brows, silently blaming Sophie for her lack of decorum. No matter how willful and arrogant Sophie Lambert usually was, she was momentarily stunned, her mind in turmoil. Margaret Rivers was a rare and virtuous matron who had never mistreated or scolded Sophie and her mother. Their monthly allowances were generous, and Margaret Rivers held the power to decide Sophie's future marriage prospects. If Margaret Rivers harbored any prejudice against her now, Sophie feared her future love life would be fraught with difficulties. Though Margaret Rivers was soft and mild-mannered, she was still the lady of the house. Until my mother overthrows her, I absolutely cannot afford to offend her. I, Sophie Lambert, come here every day pretending to be filial, just to win her favor. Now is certainly not the time to sabotage myself. A glint of cold determination flashed in Sophie's eyes. Without hesitation, she fell to her knees with a thud, crying pitifully, her tears streaming down her face as she looked weak and helpless. Elder sister, I am truly wronged. I genuinely wanted to drink this bowl of soup. Abalone and bird's nest soup are rare delicacies to me. How could I possibly do something foolish like this in front of mother? Diana Lambert lowered her gaze slightly and extended her wrist toward Margaret Rivers, her voice tinged with grievance. Mother, look, it's already red from the burn. Inwardly, Diana Lambert scoffed at Sophie Lambert's tactics. While Sophie was intelligent, she lacked the experience of navigating the intrigues of a large household. Her methods were, indeed, too naive. Resorting to tears to garner sympathy only made her appear weak and ineffective. Sophie Lambert's tearful display, with her eyes brimming with sorrow, might have moved others. Unfortunately for her, the audience consisted solely of women. Unlike men, they were not inclined to shield or coddle her. To Margaret Rivers, Sophie's fake crying only added to her annoyance. Moreover, regardless of how many faults Diana Lambert might have, she was still Margaret Rivers's biological daughter. When forced to choose between her own flesh and blood and a stepdaughter with questionable intentions, it was evident where Margaret Rivers's loyalty would lie. Margaret Rivers's once kind expression gradually turned icy. She looked at Sophie Lambert with cold eyes and asked in a frosty tone, "Do you have anything else to say for yourself?" Inwardly, Sophie Lambert silently lamented her misfortune. Gritting her teeth and disregarding the shards scattered across the floor, she dragged herself to Margaret River's feet, clinging to her legs as she sobbed uncontrollably. It's Sophie's fault. Everything is Sophie's fault. It was my carelessness in holding the teacup that caused harm to elder sister. Her sobbing was relentless, her tone humble, as she took all the blame upon herself. This left Margaret Rivers with no grounds to scold her. Seeing Sophie's tear-streaked face and reddened eyes, Margaret Rivers' heart softened unexpectedly. What a classic act of using vulnerability to turn the tide. Diana Lambert let out a cold, silent laugh before speaking slowly. So you admit it, you've long harbored resentment toward me and Mother? Sophie would never think that way. Sophie Lambert shook her head, resting against Margaret Rivers' knees, her eyelashes lowering delicately. Sophie has been frail since childhood. Just now, it was a moment of carelessness that caused me to bump into elder sister. I beg for elder sister's forgiveness. At that moment, she looked like a delicate flower swaying in the wind, as if even the gentlest breeze could sweep her away. The maids of all ranks in the room couldn't help but show pity for the fragile second Mississippi. Diana Lambert's calm, distant gaze flickered with a trace of sharpness. This was Sophie Lambert's signature tactic, feigning weakness to garner sympathy. If Diana continued to criticize her now, it would only make Sophie appear overly victimized. Lowering her eyes, Diana spoke indifferently. Since younger sister has admitted her fault, I won't pursue the matter further. I only hope that in the future, younger sister doesn't let her frailty cause any more incidents. Sophie Lambert forced a smile. Understood. She wobbled as she stood up from the floor, her clothing torn by the porcelain shards, with streaks of blood seeping from her legs. Her face twisted in pain for a moment before she turned toward Margaret Rivers, who sat in a higher seat, and bowed. Forcing out a smile more pitiful than tears, she said, "Then Sophie will take her leave. Please, Mother, don't worry about me." Chapter 8, Brewing Schemes. After the commotion, Margaret Rivers no longer appeared as warm toward her as before. She asked indifferently, "Are you all right? Do you need a physician to take a look?" Sophie Lambert, despite the sharp pain in her knee, forced herself to stand and curtsied. "No need, I can bandage it myself when I return to my courtyard." Margaret Rivers nodded coldly. Diana Lambert, meanwhile, engaged her in conversation, making her laugh brightly. In moments, no one paid Sophie Lambert any attention. Left with no choice, she limped away. The pain radiating from her knee ignited a blaze of fury in Sophie Lambert's eyes. The distance between Harmony Hall Courtyard and Cloud Serenity Courtyard felt like an insurmountable chasm to her. Biting her lip, her mind swirled with doubts as she muttered under her breath, "That wretched Diana Lambert, since when did she become so cunning?" Cloud Serenity Courtyard finally came into view, and she quickened her steps to enter. Under the shade of a tree, a woman dressed in a smoky blue gown was trimming branches. Her figure was graceful, her features stunning, showing no trace of being the mother of a 13-year-old daughter. This woman was none other than Sophie Lambert's biological mother, Evelyn Moore. Evelyn Moore, holding silver pruning shears, turned around and smiled faintly. Her voice was as soft as pearls dropping onto a jade plate. "Have your daily performances at Margaret Rivers' place managed to lower her guard yet?" "Mother!" Sophie Lambert called out, her voice crisp and clear. All the grievances she had been suppressing poured out like a flood. "That wretched Diana Lambert and that old hag Rivers conspired against me." "Oh?" Evelyn Moore's gaze sharpened. She set the shears down and gently supported Sophie as they moved into the inner room. After entering the room and dismissing all the maids who were serving, Evelyn Moore's face was as cold as ice. She snorted coldly, "This girl, still so reckless. 13 years old already, and you still don't understand the principle of walls have ears? Running outside in a panic and shouting like that, if someone else overheard, what kind of disgrace would that bring?" "I've endured so much humiliation at Madame Rivers' place," Sophie Lambert said as she lifted her dress, revealing her bloodied calves. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and her face was full of resentment. Evelyn Moore glanced at her and frowned. Tell me what happened. With Madame River's temperament, she wouldn't lay a hand on you directly. It's all because of that wretched Diana Lambert and her cunning tricks. I had already managed to please Madame Rivers, but who would have thought that wretched Diana Lambert would suddenly appear and steal all of Madame Rivers' favor? She even schemed against me, making Madame Rivers think I wanted to harm her. Sophie Lambert gritted her teeth in anger. Evelyn Moore gave her a sharp look and scolded coldly, "You're such a petty person. Diana Lambert has always treated you well. Why did a conflict suddenly arise today? Surely, you must have provoked her." "I didn't." Sophie Lambert herself felt puzzled. Diana Lambert had always been obedient to her, so why had she deliberately set her up today? Since when had she grown so scheming? Clutching her handkerchief tightly, her face was filled with grievance. "I don't care. One way or another, I must teach her a lesson." Evelyn Moore narrowed her eyes slightly and said calmly, "If you want revenge, it's simple." "Mother. Tell me quickly." Sophie Lambert, now consumed with hatred for Diana Lambert, immediately brightened at those words. She clutched Evelyn Moore's sleeve anxiously, pleading. When it came to scheming within the household, Evelyn Moore had lived in this grand residence for many years and had witnessed countless battles of wits. Her cunning far surpassed that of Sophie Lambert. Indeed, a woman's heart is hard to fathom, and the most venomous is a woman's heart. Evelyn Moore gently stroked the golden bracelet on her wrist, her eyes flashing with a cold glint. Her soft voice carried an undertone of indifference. "In 3 days, the peony banquet will take place. Diana Lambert is already 14 this year, nearing the age of debut. She'll surely want to shine at the banquet and attract marriage proposals from noble young gentlemen." Sophie Lambert's face darkened as she struggled to conceal the jealousy in her eyes. Gritting her teeth, she said, "Mother, we absolutely cannot let her have her way. Her zither skills are exceptional, and with that flying stream zither, she'll undoubtedly outshine me completely. What will become of my grand plans? So what if her zither skills are good?" Evelyn Moore lowered her gaze and took a sip of tea, a slow smile spreading across her face. "She's particularly fond of that flying stream zither, isn't she? Destroy it." Those last 4 words made Sophie Lambert ecstatic. She nearly clapped her hands in delight as she exclaimed, "Brilliant." Having studied music alongside Diana Lambert, Sophie naturally knew how deeply Diana was connected to the flying stream zither. The bond between Diana and the instrument had long been one of unparalleled harmony. Destroying the zither would be tantamount to shattering Diana's heart and soul. Sophie Lambert's smile bloomed like a flower. "Mother, this plan is truly ingenious. It's subtle enough to avoid suspicion while teaching Diana Lambert a harsh lesson. Though the peony banquet is a stage for noble young ladies to showcase their talents, the flute-playing skills of my Sophie are rare and extraordinary." "You'll surely sail through effortlessly," Evelyn Moore said with a smile, gazing at her daughter. "Mother." Sophie Lambert cooed, her cheeks tinged with a rosy blush. In her past life, she could surpass Diana Lambert. Her abilities were truly remarkable, earning her the title of the flute prodigy by later generations. The purple jade flute always accompanied her, and her elegance was unmatched. "Mother is counting on you. After you marry into the royal aristocracy, you must return to show filial piety to me. My half a lifetime of glory and wealth is all placed on you. You must strive hard. At this peony banquet, you must win first place and trample all those other noble ladies beneath your feet." Evelyn Moore gently stroked her soft hands, her voice becoming a touch more tender, though a glint of unhidden greed flashed in her enchanting eyes. Sophie Lambert, moved by these words, looked at her with sparkling eyes and smiled, saying, "Yes, Mother. If your daughter rises in the future, it will all be thanks to your devoted guidance. I will never treat you unfairly." After a moment of heartfelt mother-daughter bonding, Evelyn Moore casually remarked, "This matter, leave it to Rose Carter. That pawn we've placed beside Diana Lambert for so long has yet to cause her any significant harm. Now it's time for her to serve her purpose." Mother, you've thought of everything, Sophie Lambert chuckled charmingly, feeling immensely pleased, her heart brimming with mockery. You, Diana Lambert, still think you're a noble young lady? Let's see how you handle being betrayed by your closest maid. Send word to Rose Carter and tell her to smash that flying string zither to pieces. Ha ha ha. In the room, only Sophie Lambert's clear laughter remained, but at this moment, it sounded eerily chilling. The cruelty of this mother and daughter duo was fully revealed from this moment on. However, having lived another life, how could Diana Lambert let them have their way? Chapter 9, Laughing at the Drama Unfold. That night. The night was cold as water, the gentle, pale moonlight quietly blanketed the ground. Amidst the silence, a chilling atmosphere emerged, fully exposing the movements of those acting under the cover of darkness. In Diana Lambert's bedroom, the cheerful laughter from earlier had completely faded into silence. Ivy Clark, blow out the candle. The clear voice of a young girl, tinged with weariness, echoed. The flickering candlelight in the breeze gradually extinguished. The girl on the bed turned over, mumbling softly, as though she had fallen into a deep sleep. Rose Carter tiptoed into the room, her toes lightly touching the ground without making a sound. She whispered to Ivy Clark, "Has the mistress fallen asleep?" "Asleep," Ivy Clark replied in a low voice. Rose Carter said nothing further, only nodding slightly before standing quietly by the side. Tonight appeared ordinary, seemingly destined to pass just like every other night, silently awaiting dawn. Rose Carter glanced at the sky outside the window, letting out a long yawn, her face weary. "So sleepy. Then go to sleep first." "I'll watch over the mistress," Ivy Clark offered. Rose Carter gave a faint nod, smiling gratefully before turning to leave. About a tea's time after she left, the woman on the bed suddenly sat up straight. Her previously drowsy eyes now gleamed with sharp clarity. Ivy Clark was startled and quickly covered her mouth. "Mistress, why aren't you asleep? You'll be exhausted tomorrow. The day after is the peony banquet, you must rest well." Diana Lambert raised her hand slightly, her voice lazy yet laced with an ominous chill. "Tonight, I'll take you to watch a good show." "A good show? At this hour, what troupe could possibly come to perform for you?" Diana Lambert slightly curled her lips, a cold smile appearing on her face, making her bare visage seem as though it was cloaked in a layer of frost. Her eyes glimmered with a sharp, icy light. "The protagonist of this play is someone you know most intimately yet find most unfamiliar." "Who is it?" Diana Lambert's lips parted slightly, and she softly uttered a name, Rose Carter. As soon as the words left her mouth, before Ivy Clark could even register her shock, outside the window under the cover of night, a faint golden figure glanced around cautiously, tugged at their collar, and quickly headed south. That hurried silhouette appeared highly suspicious. Ivy Clark's expression shifted between astonishment and uncertainty. She exclaimed, "Wasn't Rose Carter just wearing a pale yellow floral dress earlier?" "That figure, is Rose Carter?" Diana Lambert said nothing, merely nodding slightly. What could she possibly be doing outside at this hour? Ivy Clark's face turned pale with disbelief. Ivy Clark's look of shock and incredulity mirrored Diana Lambert's own expression from long ago, when she first uncovered Rose Carter's betrayal. It was a testament to just how well Rose Carter had concealed her true self, how deeply her schemes ran. Her machinations were likely so intricate that even Sophie Lambert and her mother would fall short in comparison. Diana Lambert fixed her gaze on Rose Carter's retreating figure until the pale yellow silhouette completely disappeared into the night, not even a corner of her dress remaining in sight. Only then did Diana withdraw her gaze, her tone cool and detached as she said, "It seems I must reorganize the people in Orchid Fragrance Courtyard. Let them not believe for a moment that a mere concubine could rise above me." "What you mean is?" Ivy Clark, being quick-witted, immediately grasped Diana Lambert's implication after a brief moment of thought. Her cheeks puffed up with anger. "That concubine Evelyn Moore is truly outrageous. She's just a mere concubine, which, to put it bluntly, is nothing more than a servant. Yet she dares to plant spies around you." A faint smile appeared on Diana Lambert's lips. It's all right. I'll make them pay in blood. Ivy Clark suddenly noticed that, at this moment, Diana Lambert's stunningly beautiful face seemed to radiate a holy, noble, and elegant light, truly the demeanor of an aristocratic lady. She was no longer the delicate young lady who only knew poetry, painting, and music, gentle and demure, as Ivy Clark once knew her. Now, she exuded a newfound brilliance that left people in awe. Unknowingly, it seemed as though a miraculous transformation was taking place. The thread of fate, once clear, was suddenly shrouded in mist. From the moment she was reborn, her destiny had taken a dramatic turn. All the tragedies of her past life would not repeat themselves. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, Diana Lambert remained quiet and inactive, maintaining peace with Sophie Lambert and her mother without stirring up any further trouble. The peony banquet was fast approaching. As in her previous life, the Lambert household received 2 invitations from the Marchioness of Bright Sun, inviting Diana Lambert and Sophie Lambert to attend. Diana Lambert rose early to dress herself. Clad in a pure white gown adorned with butterfly patterns, her attire accentuated her ethereal grace. Her jet-black hair was styled in an elegant updo, adorned with a pair of exquisite jade butterfly hairpins. From antennae to wings, every detail was intricately carved, as though the butterflies were poised to take flight from her hair. Her breathtaking beauty became even more vivid and enchanting. Her already peerless appearance, enhanced by a touch of makeup, made her seem otherworldly, like a celestial maiden descending to earth. At the main gate of the Lambert estate, a luxurious 8-horse carriage awaited. She gracefully stepped onto the carriage. Although she was a noble young lady, raised in an illustrious family, her movements carried a sense of boldness and strength, far from being crude. "Sister, wait for me." Just as she was about to set off, a sharp voice rang out from outside, causing her to frown slightly and lift the curtain to look out. "Dear sister, you cannot leave me behind." Sophie Lambert, who had clearly put great effort into her appearance today, was now in complete disarray. Holding up her pink dress, she hurriedly chased after the carriage. Diana Lambert let out a cold laugh, her voice icy and filled with mockery. "Don't you have your own carriage? If not, ask Aunt Evelyn Moore to buy you one. Besides, are there not other carriages in the Lambert household? Why must you insist on competing for mine? What exactly are you scheming?" She, Diana Lambert, was no saint. She wasn't about to be magnanimous enough to share a carriage with her sworn enemy. This matter. Sophie Lambert was momentarily at a loss for words, clenching her fists in frustration. Speaking of carriages, with the Lambert household's wealth, there were certainly more than just this one. However, none of them were as luxurious and opulent as this particular carriage. The peony banquet was her first appearance among the aristocracy, and if she arrived in a plain black carriage, wouldn't she become a laughingstock? Worse, the young gentleman who had taken a liking to her might think she was stingy and petty. Thinking of this, Sophie Lambert softened her tone, her eyes shimmering like autumn water as she looked pleadingly at Diana Lambert. "Sister, please don't be angry with me anymore. I admit I was careless last time and caused trouble, upsetting you. But we are sisters, how could we hold grudges overnight? Please, let me ride with you in this carriage." "Sisters don't hold grudges overnight?" Diana Lambert murmured, repeating the phrase. Her previously indifferent gaze suddenly glinted with a frosty chill. At this moment, all she wanted was to grab Sophie Lambert by the collar and demand answers. Chapter 10, Marquis Bright Sun Manor. "Do you also understand the principle that sisters should not hold grudges overnight? You deliberately sowed discord, causing the Duke to misunderstand me as someone unchaste, further instigating until my newborn child met a tragic end. And now, you dare to mention sisters should not hold grudges overnight in front of me? If there weren't a deep-seated grudge, why would you harm me so cruelly?" Diana Lambert let out a cold laugh. "Even though you are indeed my younger sister, fighting over something as trivial as a carriage, what kind of good sisterhood is that?" Seeing this, Sophie Lambert grew anxious. Could it be that she really had to sit in that pitch-black carriage? How humiliating. Though she was thick-skinned, she couldn't bear the scrutinizing gazes of the other noble ladies. She looked around. At this moment, the street was bustling, and everyone was drawn to the scene in front of the Lambert residence. Many gossipy women were whispering amongst themselves. Sophie Lambert's eyes darted around before she spoke with tears welling up. "Elder sister. You're intentionally making things difficult for me, preventing me from attending Madame Marquis Bright's son's peony banquet, just so you can shine alone." Sitting inside the carriage, Diana Lambert could still hear the murmurs of the onlookers sympathizing with Sophie Lambert. Indeed, a young lady as beautiful as a flower, if not for the painful lessons of her past life, Diana might have pitied Sophie Lambert as well. At this moment, there was only one thought in her heart: she had to teach Sophie Lambert a lesson. Whether in her past life or this one, Sophie Lambert was exceptionally skilled at manipulating public opinion, spreading rumors exactly as she wished. Previously, Diana Lambert had never paid attention to those whispers, but this time, she absolutely would not let Sophie Lambert have her way. She would not allow her reputation, as the eldest daughter of the Lambert family, to be associated with the word jealousy. Diana Lambert steadied her emotions, her expression composed as she smiled elegantly while gazing out the carriage window. Slowly, she spoke. "First of all, I would never stop you from attending the peony banquet out of jealousy, because I am confident I can outshine you openly and honorably without resorting to any underhanded tactics. Second, this carriage is my mother's dowry. You, as the daughter of a concubine, wanting to sit in her carriage, wouldn't that be a joke to the world? And finally, don't even think about using rumors to tarnish my name. I trust that everyone has the wisdom to see through your false facade." Diana Lambert's calm yet cutting words pierced Sophie Lambert's heart like a dagger, causing her face to shift between shades of green and white. Sophie, forgetting to maintain her usual pretense of frailty, glared at Diana, her almond-shaped eyes blazing with fury. Diana Lambert curved her lips into a faintly mocking smile and let the curtain fall, severing her view of everything outside. She turned to the coachman and instructed, "Pay her no mind. Drive straight to the Marquis of Bright's son Manor. Don't let someone so insignificant delay our important matters, you can't afford the consequences." The two sleek and glossy horses pulled the carriage forward, gliding through the wind as dust billowed behind them. Sophie Lambert, standing by the roadside, hastily stepped back to avoid the dust, her eyes brimming with resentment. She, the dignified young lady of the Lambert household, had been dismissed as someone insignificant? Diana Lambert, bask in your arrogance for now. When you discover the flying stream zither with its strings snapped to shreds, let's see if you can still smile as brightly as a flower. Inside the exquisite emerald green carriage adorned with jewels, which gradually disappeared into the distance, Diana Lambert leaned against the cushioned seat, her delicate hand holding a book. On her fair and refined face, a faint trace of melancholy lingered. Her fingers gripped the book so tightly they turned pale. Whether in her past life or this one, the peony banquet held tremendous significance for her. Today, she would once again meet the person who occupied her thoughts day and night. Diana Lambert closed the book, murmuring dreamily, "I may hate Sophie Lambert to the marrow of my bones, but when it comes to him, I can never harden my heart." Alexander Blackwood. The man of extraordinary charm and grace seemed to be her destined calamity, one she could neither escape nor avoid. She could only be with him, entangled in love and hate for eternity, until death ultimately parted them. Diana Lambert closed her eyes, holding back the tears threatening to fall. Her heart, once serene like a tranquil lake, had been stirred into a restless spring by the sudden appearance of that man, leaving her unable to regain her composure. After what felt like an eternity, she opened her eyes. This time an unusual determination gleamed in her sparkling gaze. Heaven had granted her a chance to be reborn, thus, everything could begin anew. No longer would Sophie Lambert's schemes tear them apart, and the tragic fate between her and Alexander Blackwood from her past life would never repeat itself. Yet, at this moment, Diana Lambert was still young and inexperienced, unfamiliar with the complexities of the world. The decision she made now would bring her immense joy, but also unimaginable sorrow in the future. "Young mistress, Marquis Bright's son Manor is just ahead," Ivy Clark's voice called from outside the carriage. Diana Lambert composed herself, the confusion and melancholy on her face gradually replaced by a gentle, graceful smile. The strict upbringing of the Lambert household had instilled in her an air of calm and elegance. But after 2 lifetimes, having tasted the bitterness and sweetness of human existence, the radiant smile she now wore no longer carried the innocence and purity of a young maiden. The neighing of a fine steed echoed as the carriage slowly came to a halt before Marquis Bright's Sun Manor. Diana Lambert lifted the curtain and stepped down, her embroidered shoes delicately touching the steps leading to the grand entrance of the estate. Marquis Bright's Sun Manor remained as magnificent and splendid as she remembered, with its glazed tiles and white brick walls. A maid led her into the manor's garden. Along the way, small bridges arched over gently flowing streams, and lush green lawns stretched endlessly, creating a serene and breathtaking scene. "Oh, isn't this the eldest daughter of the Lambert family?" A sarcastic voice broke the tranquility in Diana Lambert's heart. She turned to see a familiar face. A beautiful woman, her slender figure adorned in luxurious silks and brocades, was gracefully approaching. Upon seeing this old acquaintance, Diana Lambert furrowed her brows slightly and replied coldly, "Miss Spencer, it has indeed been a long time." "What are you saying?" Charlotte Spencer covered her mouth and chuckled softly, her sharp, hook-like eyes sweeping back and forth to assess Diana Lambert. "It's been a few days since we last met, and it seems Lady Lambert has grown even more beautiful." "How could I possibly compare to Lady Spencer's charm?" Diana Lambert curled her lips into a faint smile, though inwardly she scoffed at such hollow pleasantries. The woman standing before her was none other than Charlotte Spencer, the cherished daughter of the current Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wielded immense power in court and had the backing of the Regent King, making his influence so formidable that it nearly overshadowed the great general of the nation. Charlotte Spencer, the Prime Minister's beloved daughter, and Diana Lambert, the daughter of the reigning great general, were natural rivals. Since ancient times, civil officials and military generals had rarely seen eye to eye, and the court was no exception. The Prime Minister and the great general each led opposing factions, locked in fierce competition for power. This rivalry inevitably extended to their descendants. Charlotte Spencer had always found Diana Lambert's demeanor distasteful. Neither woman was willing to yield to the other, and their clashes were frequent and intense, making them practically sworn enemies. If Charlotte Spencer were to suddenly change her attitude and seek friendship with her, Diana Lambert would never believe it for a second. At this moment, she remained cautious, her expression cold and indifferent. Faced with such aloofness, Charlotte Spencer's smile stiffened slightly before morphing into an air of arrogant pride. "I wonder what talent Lady Lambert plans to showcase today?" Chapter 11, The White Lotus and the True Lotus. "Play it." Diana Lambert slightly curled her lips, instantly causing Charlotte Spencer's face to darken. Charlotte had always enjoyed competing with Diana Lambert, but whether it was poetry, music, painting, or calligraphy, she was always one step behind Diana. This had always been a source of deep frustration for her, making her wish she could curse Diana day and night or tear her into pieces. This peony banquet held special significance for all the noble young ladies in the capital. Countless talented young men and influential noblewomen would attend, making it a perfect opportunity to secure a socially advantageous marriage. If Diana Lambert were to play a tune, what chance would Charlotte Spencer have left? Though she knew she was inferior, she refused to lose her composure. Lifting her chin high, she scoffed coldly, "Diana Lambert, don't get too full of yourself." With that, she flung her sleeves and turned to leave, though her departing gaze betrayed a barely concealed malice. Diana Lambert felt a slight unease in her heart. It seemed as though something was quietly shifting. In her previous life, she hadn't encountered Charlotte Spencer here. Would this brief interaction leave a far-reaching impact? Perhaps no one could know the answer. Diana steadied herself, dispelling the unease in her heart, and walked gracefully toward the garden of Marquis Bright's Sun Manor. The Marquis Bright's Sun Manor truly lived up to its reputation as a noble family's estate. The garden alone could accommodate thousands of people. It was meticulously arranged, with flowers blooming in a vibrant array, lush green willow branches swaying, and the air brimming with the vitality of spring. 8 screens adorned with plum blossoms, orchids, chrysanthemums, and bamboo divided the garden into 2 sections, one for male guests and the other for female guests. Amidst this poetic setting, lively conversations filled the air. Diana Lambert headed straight toward the group of noble young ladies. Dressed in luxurious attire, with beauty and talent surpassing others, and backed by an illustrious family, she stood out among the noble women. Her gentle demeanor further endeared her to the young ladies of the capital, and it wasn't long before she was chatting animatedly with a few acquaintances. "Look, Diana, isn't that the 3rd young lady from your household?" exclaimed one of the noble women, pointing in surprise toward the distance. Diana Lambert raised her eyebrows and followed the direction of the gesture. The figure in a pink dress, laughing and chatting with a young man, was none other than Sophie Lambert. Noticing that the man beside Sophie was the son of the Minister of Revenue, Diana's gaze turned cold. She had underestimated Sophie Lambert. She had thought Sophie still had some sense of shame, but to her surprise, she had dared to arrive in that shabby, black-painted carriage and was now even flirting with the Minister of Revenue's son. Truly audacious. To act so shamelessly and intimately with a man in such a public setting was utterly disgraceful for the Lambert household. Diana Lambert gritted her teeth, her gaze icy cold. She didn't care how recklessly Sophie Lambert wanted to live her life, but if outsiders were to mistake all the daughters of the Lambert household as shameless, her own reputation would be utterly ruined. Sophie Lambert slowly approached, her lips curving into an excited smile after reluctantly bidding farewell to the son of the Ministry of Revenue's minister. Fate was indeed on her side. Though she had arrived in a shabby carriage, she had skillfully stirred the sympathy of the minister's charming son, successfully securing his favor. Her heart brimmed with delight. Suddenly, Diana Lambert's figure appeared before her. Sophie's eyes sparkled as she stepped forward, her lips forming a radiant smile. "Elder sister, how heartless of you to leave me behind and go ahead on your own. Thankfully, this young gentleman helped me, or I would have missed the peony banquet entirely." Though her voice wasn't loud, its clear and crisp tone immediately drew attention. The gazes of those around them gradually turned curious, fixed on the 2 Lambert sisters. Curiosity was only natural. Even in ancient times, people had vivid imaginations. Lost in thought, they painted a detailed scene in their minds. The legitimate elder sister secretly bullied the illegitimate younger sister, even deliberately preventing her from attending the peony banquet. The younger sister, helpless and deeply aggrieved, was suddenly rescued by the minister's son, who brought her just in time to the banquet. In any era, the rivalry between legitimate and illegitimate children was always a hot topic of gossip. Hearing this, the noble ladies and young maidens present covered their mouths, whispering and eagerly watching the drama unfold. Amid the countless gazes, Diana Lambert's lightly made-up face turned slightly colder. She stared at Sophie Lambert with an indifferent and detached expression, her gaze as calm and deep as a still lake. She wanted to see just how far Sophie Lambert would go with her schemes. Sophie bit her lower lip gently, her expression pitiful, her beautiful eyes shimmering with tears. "Elder sister, Sophie knows she can never match your kindness and grace. For the upcoming talented women's competition in the capital, you can rest assured that Sophie will never stand in your way of winning." The implications of her words caused the noble women around them to exchange knowing glances. This peony banquet was, in essence, a disguised competition for talented young ladies. Aristocratic daughters of high status had been meticulously preparing for it. The top spot was coveted by countless individuals. She went to such lengths to keep her younger sister from attending the banquet, all because she's afraid her sister might outshine her. "I never thought she'd be that kind of person." Diana Lambert quietly listened to these words, letting them drift into her ears. Her expression remained calm and indifferent as before, though the corners of her lips lifted slightly in a faint smirk, tinged with mockery. Adding fuel to the fire, what a masterful tactic. If it were the former her, weak and fragile in temperament, she would have already been overwhelmed by public pressure, her eyes turning red and tears streaming down. But now, her heart was as firm as steel. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the young girl, just entering her prime, raised her slender neck high. Her skin, white as snow, glowed with a gentle radiance like jade under the dazzling light of the luxurious surroundings. Her phoenix-like eyes sparkled like the stars, reflecting wisdom and a deep understanding of the world. They showed no hesitation in the face of criticism, only calm composure and a noble demeanor. Draped in a pure white, elegant garment, her movements were as graceful and natural as flowing water and drifting clouds. The long, simple yet refined dress, with its sleeves and hem embroidered with silver-threaded lotus patterns, enhanced her unparalleled delicacy. She, a beauty of ethereal grace like a lotus flower, stood tall against the disdainful gazes of others, maintaining an attitude neither arrogant nor self-deprecating, neither joyous nor sorrowful. If Sophie Lambert was a false white lotus, then Diana Lambert was a newly blooming hibiscus, her petals unfolding naturally, exuding a sacred and transcendent beauty. The noble ladies gathered around to watch the drama unfold, a layer of doubt rising in their hearts. Could a girl embodying such pure beauty of heaven and earth truly be so jealous as to refuse Sophie Lambert a ride on her carriage, as Sophie claimed? Chapter 12, Artful Words and Clever Speech. Facing Sophie Lambert's provocative gaze, the girl in white gave a faint smile. Indeed, everything you said is true. As soon as the words left her lips, Sophie Lambert's heart leapt with joy. So my sister admits it? I did arrive at the Marquis Bright Sun Manor in the 8-treasure emerald canopy carriage, which is indeed the finest and most luxurious in the household. There was space left in the carriage, and I truly did refuse to let you on. Diana Lambert's clear eyes shone, her gaze piercing through to Sophie's very soul. Hearing her admission, a flash of triumph appeared in Sophie Lambert's eyes. She immediately put on a pitiful expression, her eyes welling up with tears as though they were about to spill over. The noble ladies surrounding them, eager for gossip, perked up their ears and silently awaited the next part of the story. But Diana Lambert suddenly changed her tone. This is yet another matter of necessity. The smile on Sophie Lambert's lips froze, quickly replaced by a malicious glint in her eyes. Now, she had successfully pinned the harsh accusation of mistreating a concubine's daughter on Diana Lambert. No matter how clever Diana was, it would be difficult to clear her name. This carriage is one of the dowry items my mother brought with her when she married into the Lambert family, naturally making it extremely valuable. If my maternal grandfather were to find out that even the daughter of a concubine dared to sit in it, I fear he would be so enraged that he might cough up blood. Diana Lambert's voice was gentle, but it carried a sharp undertone. A dowry, whether before or after marriage, was considered the personal property of the bride, and even the husband had no right to use it at will. To put it plainly, a dowry was the private wealth a bride brought to her husband's household. Wealthy families often prepared lavish dowries for their daughters, ensuring that they could live comfortably without relying on their husbands' households. This allowed them to hold their heads high in their new homes, without needing to bow to anyone. Before Margaret Rivers married, she had been the cherished treasure of her family. Her father, Diana Lambert's maternal grandfather, had once been a valiant general with a fiery temper and an immense love for his daughter. If he found out that Margaret Rivers' dowry had been so disrespected, he would likely be furious enough to storm the Lambert household himself. Diana Lambert lightly blinked her long lashes, her beautiful eyes sweeping over the young noblewomen nearby. Her lips curved into a smile, though the smile never reached her eyes. All of you here surely wish to find an ideal husband, but to give your dowry to the daughter of a concubine, who among you would be so magnanimous? As soon as her words fell, the expressions of the young ladies shifted. No matter how abundant or luxurious a dowry might be, it was still the personal property of the bride. Even the most virtuous wife would not be generous enough to share it in such a way. Seeing that no one spoke up for a long while, Diana Lambert turned her face, her expression indifferent. Or perhaps, Sophie Lambert, when you marry as a legitimate wife in the future, will you generously share your dowry with others? That would certainly make you gentle and virtuous. Under the mocking gazes of everyone present, Sophie Lambert's delicate face turned pale. The tears that had welled up in her eyes vanished, replaced by a barely concealed look of venomous hatred. Her resentment surged like a tidal wave, almost becoming tangible. Sophie Lambert bit her lip hard, swallowing the sharp retorts that threatened to spill out. In front of so many upper-class elites, she absolutely could not lose face. Her slender, jade-like fingers dug into her flesh, leaving her fair skin bruised and purple from the pain. Diana Lambert, this is all your fault. At this moment, Sophie Lambert was enduring a profound sense of humiliation, biting her lip to avoid causing further trouble. But Diana Lambert was not someone who would easily let her off the hook. If Sophie Lambert didn't pay the price, how could Diana find solace for the soul of her unfortunate child? As for the matter of me being jealous of your talent, Diana Lambert curved her lips, almost letting out a laugh, it's nothing but nonsense. Tonight, at the Grand Talent Gathering, I'm eager to see how much your flute-playing skills have improved. The flute. A seemingly ordinary word, yet laden with ambiguous, provocative undertones. Sophie Lambert's face turned bright red with anger, but she forced herself to suppress her fury. Suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind. Lowering her voice intentionally so only Diana could hear, she spoke with venomous resentment. Your competence, isn't it all thanks to the unparalleled flying stream zither? Too bad, that zither has already been destroyed by me. Oh? Did you personally witness it being destroyed, or were you the one who did it yourself? The smile on Diana Lambert's lips was clearly mocking. The zither being destroyed is a fact, don't deny it. Without the flying stream zither, you can only showcase 70% of your skills. Like that, how could you possibly compete with me? Sophie Lambert glared at Diana, her eyes brimming with hatred. If you haven't seen it with your own eyes, don't be so quick to conclude. After all, this world is full of surprises. Diana Lambert left behind this cryptic remark before arrogantly turning to leave. Her rebirth was one such surprise. The flying stream zither remaining intact was another. Life is like a play, indeed full of unexpected twists. Hopefully, Sophie Lambert wouldn't be too shocked by today's surprise. Diana Lambert's lips curled into a mocking smile that gradually blossomed. Meanwhile, Sophie Lambert stared after her retreating figure. Diana's words, "The world is full of surprises," echoing endlessly in her mind, leaving her in turmoil. What did those words mean? Recalling the moment she heard the news about the harp being destroyed, Diana Lambert remained calm, showing no signs of confusion. Could it be that she had already been prepared for it? Sophie Lambert stood frozen in place, her gaze wavering uncertainly. A whirlwind of chaotic thoughts surged through her mind, leaving her completely unsettled and overwhelmed with panic. Everything was unfolding in an unpredictable direction. But this was absolutely not what Sophie Lambert had hoped for. After the argument with Sophie Lambert, Diana Lambert felt much more at ease. She let out a relieved sigh and walked toward the highlight of today's peony banquet, the twin peonies. Lady Marquis Bright's son, a noblewoman in her 40s, was remarkably well maintained, with not a single wrinkle on her face, looking as youthful as a maiden in her 20s. At that moment, she was engaged in cheerful conversation with those around her, showcasing her exceptional social skills. It was said that Lady Marquis Bright's son adored flowers, which explained why the Marquis Bright's son manor was brimming with spring's vibrant hues. Flowers of all kinds bloomed brilliantly, like embroidered silk under the radiant sunlight, glimmering with rainbow-like colors. Their fragrance lingered in the air, rich yet elegant. As Diana Lambert strolled through the garden, a novel sensation rose within her. Your subtle remarks about the second Miss Lambert earlier were quite impressive. The voice was gentle and soothing, warm yet refined, much like the man himself, exuding a noble and virtuous demeanor. I was merely expressing my thoughts, she said, turning her head with a smile as beautiful as a painting. Standing behind her was none other than the ethereal Ethan Wright. A man true to his name. He possessed the gentle grace of jade, the scholarly elegance of literature, and a calm, profound depth like ink. Look at this twin peony, Diana Lambert said, resting her chin on her hand. Her eyes held a tinge of sadness as she gazed at the two blooming peonies on the branch. When it's in full bloom, it's breathtakingly beautiful, adored by all. But once it withers, I fear no one will pay it any attention. Chapter 13, Sharing the White Robe. The peony, worthy of its title as the king of flowers, was further elevated by this rare twin peony variety called powdered mist drifting over the river. The name itself was poetic, and the flower, as large as a bowl, was radiant, exquisite, and fragrant. Yet, when the flower withers, today's praises would become nothing more than fleeting clouds. "You're too pessimistic," Ethan Wright said softly as he stepped forward, standing side by side with her. His warm gaze rested on the blooming peonies, filled with tenderness. The life of a flower is defined by its moment of blossoming. People often say that the hibiscus blooms in the morning and fades by evening, lasting only an hour. But what remains in their memory is the brilliance of that fleeting moment. A flower's bloom is never meaningless. "Perhaps you're right," Diana Lambert smiled faintly. Reborn into a new life, her thoughts had completely changed. The tragic death of her child was a scene forever etched in her memory. She was no longer the naive 14-year-old girl who dreamed of romantic ideals. Her heart had long since bled dry. "Look, it's the Regent King's carriage. The Regent King has arrived. Shall you check if my makeup is smudged?" The area where the women gathered suddenly grew lively and chaotic due to the arrival of a man of unparalleled grace. Luxurious robes, elegant adornments, all of it was for one person. Diana Lambert, who had been calm and composed, suddenly trembled slightly. Her dark eyes glanced toward the sea of people. In this world, there existed a type of person who was born extraordinary, someone who, even in a crowd of thousands, could instantly become the center of attention. And the current Regent King, Alexander Blackwood, was undoubtedly the most outstanding of them all. He was the dragon among men. Guided by a faintly familiar feeling, Diana Lambert almost immediately spotted his tall figure amidst the vast crowd. That towering presence, dressed in a white robe adorned with intricate silver patterns, was the dream figure of countless women. A trace of indescribable astonishment flickered across Diana Lambert's face. Today, he had also chosen a white robe, simple in design as he preferred, with only a few luxurious patterns meticulously embroidered along the hem by skilled hands. Truly, he exuded an air of elegance and carefree charm. From afar, her attire and the Regent King's bore an uncanny resemblance. If one didn't look closely, it could even be mistaken as the same design, tailored exclusively. Scanning the entire hall, only she and the Regent King wore white garments. Faced with this coincidence, the corners of Diana Lambert's lips twitched. She originally didn't want to draw attention, but things didn't go as she wished. In her previous life, the Regent King had clearly worn a deep green robe, exuding both elegance and authority. Yet today, oddly enough, he had switched to a white robe with a design remarkably similar to hers. Was this a coincidence destined by the heavens, or a fateful entanglement in the shadows of destiny? That tall and imposing figure gradually approached, his handsome face coming into view. The contours of his features were bold and masculine, radiating strength and confidence. It was not the delicate, soft beauty that modern girls favored. Alexander Blackwood was undoubtedly striking, but his appeal lay in his rugged masculinity, a natural charm that extended from his face to his physique, exuding resoluteness and charisma. Diana Lambert's gaze froze, and for a moment, she was utterly entranced. This was the man she had once loved with all her heart. And it was also him who had shattered her beautiful dreams, sweeping away all her youthful sincerity with Sophie Lambert's divisive words. In her past life, she had been like a moth to a flame, recklessly loving him without hesitation. Yet in the end, she had faced a tragic and sorrowful fate. In this life, could she once again risk everything to love him? Diana Lambert murmured to herself. At that moment, amidst the crowd, Alexander Blackwood seemed to sense something and slowly lifted his head. His sharp, eagle-like eyes carried an inquisitive gaze as they landed on the young woman dressed in a moonlit white robe. As someone known for his swift and decisive actions, with a firm and unyielding demeanor, his natural gaze exuded dominance and arrogance. Yet the sharpness in his eyes seemed to dissipate like mist when they met Diana Lambert's calm and serene gaze. The frail young woman, like a bamboo swaying in the wind, showed no fear of his domineering stare. She remained composed and unflustered, her expression unchanging. Her eyes did not burn with the fiery passion and infatuation that other girls her age displayed when looking at him. Instead, her phoenix-like eyes, cool and detached, even seemed to carry a hint of defiance. She quickly turned her face away, avoiding his gaze. Noticing the pristine white robe identical to his own, the corners of Alexander Blackwood's lips curled into an enigmatic smile. Interesting. Just moments ago, when their eyes met, the sharp and commanding aura in Alexander Blackwood's gaze startled Diana Lambert. A suffocating discomfort, as though her throat was being constricted, made her hurriedly lower her head, evading that icy stare. Alexander Blackwood still possessed the same striking appearance and overwhelming charisma as when she first met him. It was just that she was no longer the naive and pure Diana Lambert of the past. "First Lady, could it be that you're so captivated you've lost yourself?" Ethan Wright smiled teasingly at her. If he was like a piece of jade, then Alexander Blackwood was a blazing fire. Ethan Wright always made people feel comfortable and at ease, even when his words carried a teasing tone, they were full of wit. But Alexander Blackwood was different, his fiery, domineering, and intense presence always made Diana Lambert feel as though she was being consumed by flames. "Indeed, I was merely admiring how handsome the Regent King is." Diana Lambert gently shook her head, her gaze turning calm. To everyone else, she was just a young maiden seeing the Regent King for the first time. Even Alexander Blackwood himself had no memory of the past they shared, of the things she could never forget. In this world, only she clearly knew what had happened, or what was bound to happen in the future. For instance, the upcoming talented ladies' gathering. Time swiftly flew by. In no time, the bell signaling the hour of Shen had rung. Madame Marquis Bright's son, the hostess of tonight's banquet, smiled and addressed everyone. "The main purpose of this 100 Flowers banquet is, of course, to enjoy the blossoms. But I believe everyone is even more eager to witness the performances of these beautiful young ladies, who are as lovely as fresh flowers themselves. Now that everyone has arrived." Madame Marquis Bright's son cast a glance at the Regent King seated on the high platform. He was the true centerpiece of tonight's event. The smile at the corner of her eyes deepened as she continued, "Let us see the talents of these young ladies, shall we?" There were a total of 4 categories of talents: poetry and painting, singing, dancing, and music. Most noble-born ladies from aristocratic families had their own unique skills. Each was eager to showcase her beauty and talent before the Regent King. Seated on the high platform, Alexander Blackwood leaned back against a luxurious chaise lounge upholstered with soft lambskin. He picked up a green grape and popped it into his mouth, his gaze filled with interest as he looked toward the young girl who had kept her head lowered in the hall. "Henry Carter, do you know who she is?" He narrowed his phoenix-shaped eyes slightly, a glimmer of amusement flashing in their depths. The personal guard addressed as Henry Carter glanced briefly at the girl before retracting his gaze. His expression remained calm as water as he respectfully replied, "Your Highness, that is the eldest daughter of General Lambert's household, named Diana Lambert." Chapter 14, A Dance That Stirred the Heart. 1. Diana Lambert, Diana. Alexander Blackwood's eyes flashed with a hint of amusement as he softly repeated the name, finding it particularly meaningful. "Do you know why she keeps lowering her head?" The entire room was filled with women, each craning their necks, their lips curled into shy smiles, like peacocks spreading their tails, eagerly vying for his attention. Yet, she was the sole exception. Henry Carter, with a cold expression, shook his head and replied, "I don't know." "Take a guess," Alexander Blackwood said, rubbing his chin with interest. "Perhaps, she's feeling shy." At that moment, Diana Lambert only wanted to bury her face in her chest. The searing gaze from the upper left corner bore down on her, making her feel utterly uneasy. Shy? Completely absurd. She was merely wondering why Alexander Blackwood seemed so particularly interested in her. Everyone knew Alexander Blackwood had no interest in women. The prince, trained in matters of the bedchamber since the age of 12, still had only 2 maids in his household and not even a single concubine. Yet now, his gaze, as if wanting to devour her whole, lingered persistently on her cheek. Diana Lambert inwardly sighed in distress. Moments later, it was her turn to draw lots and take the stage to showcase her talents. She stared intently at the character on the card, her lips unconsciously tightening. The number was completely different from her past life. How many participants are there in this competition? She couldn't help but ask. Lady Marquis Bright Sun smiled gently. 36. And the lot in Diana Lambert's hand bore none other than the number 36. Fate plays its tricks, but perhaps only to such an extent. Even though her heart was tangled like a ball of thread, Diana Lambert could only stand and watch as the grand event began. The young women, dressed in splendid attire, took turns showcasing their special talents. In an instant, the harmonious sounds of musical instruments, melodious singing, and breathtaking paintings were all on display. The skills they had painstakingly honed since childhood were indeed unique to each individual. There were those who played instruments, those who painted, and those who recited poetry. It wasn't until a figure in red swept across her vision that Diana Lambert snapped out of her daze and turned her gaze toward the stage. The fiery red dance attire clung to a slender figure, revealing delicate arms, with layers of cascading fabric that were truly magnificent. The young woman with almond-shaped eyes and elegant brows standing on the main stage was none other than Charlotte Spencer. Clever indeed. Diana Lambert nodded slightly, a trace of astonishment flickering in her eyes. Charlotte Spencer, while not particularly outstanding in music, chess, calligraphy, or painting, nor exceptional in dance, held the advantage of a stunning face and a graceful figure. Draped in the crimson dance dress, with its flowing sheer fabric, she appeared even more alluring and enchanting. Though her dance skills were not extraordinary, her breathtaking beauty etched itself deeply into the minds of the audience. As the music began, the girl in the fiery red dress moved gracefully. She performed the floral fountain dance, a routine of moderate difficulty. Her slender waist twirled elegantly in midair, exuding an irresistible allure. She danced with charm, her large eyes shimmering like electricity, casting seductive glances toward Alexander Blackwood on the stage. Her radiant beauty, captivating and mesmerizing, brought a faint smile to his lips. As the dance concluded, Charlotte Spencer gracefully bent her slender waist in a bow, and a round of applause erupted. Marvelous, truly deserving of a grand reward, Alexander Blackwood clapped first, his hearty laughter ringing out. Charlotte Spencer's gaze carried a thread of affection as she smiled alluringly. Thank you for the compliment, Regent King. Standing beside her, Sophie Lambert clenched her fists tightly, her eyes nearly blazing with fury as she cursed inwardly, Charlotte Spencer, you wretched woman. How dare you try to seduce the Regent King? Shameless. The Regent King was, in truth, the dream of every woman present. Even Sophie Lambert had been captivated when she first laid eyes on him, her gaze turning dreamy and infatuated. Unparalleled in beauty, wielding immense power and authority, he was the most distinguished man in the entire Hien Dynasty dynasty. With such an extraordinary status, how could she not be moved? She silently tightened her grip on her palms. If she could marry the Regent King, who in the world would dare ridicule her status as a concubine-born daughter ever again? A glint of greed flashed in Sophie Lambert's beautiful eyes. The title of Regent King's consort was far more alluring than being the wife of the Minister of Revenue's son. Her fingers gripped the bamboo slip in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. After a few more participants, it was finally her turn. She adjusted her attire, a gentle, bashful smile blooming on her lips. Her features, more delicate than Charlotte Spencer's, resembled an exquisite orchid, radiating a subtle and enchanting fragrance. Unlike Charlotte Spencer's seductive charm, Sophie exuded a purer, more elegant beauty, one that was refined and captivating enough to draw every gaze. This humble girl would like to present a flute performance. At the sound of her soft voice, Diana Lambert's eyes suddenly snapped open, a fleeting flash of coldness passing through them. The time for retribution had come. Sophie Lambert stood atop the high platform, her face adorned with a gentle smile, holding a purple jade flute in her hand. The finely crafted jade emitted a faint lavender glow, casting a soft hue on her fair skin. As the flute touched her cherry-red lips, a melodious tune flowed forth. Sophie Lambert's eyes were half-closed, a dreamy mist seeming to envelop them. Her gaze swept over the audience, finally resting on the tall, handsome figure of the Regent King, refusing to look away. The Regent King, so strikingly handsome. Only a man like him could command an army of hundreds of thousands, leading them to battlefields with courage and valor, creating legendary feats of heroism. They say heroes cannot resist the allure of a beauty, but who would have thought that beauties, too, could be drawn to heroes? Diana Lambert stood nearby, observing coldly. She had to admit, Sophie Lambert was indeed a beauty and knew how to present herself. The light pink dress she wore accentuated her delicate fragility, her slender waist seeming as though it might break with a mere touch. Combined with the enchanting melody from her flute, it was no wonder people were captivated. No wonder she had earned the title, the flute prodigy. But in this life, would she still let Sophie Lambert live so freely and comfortably? Diana Lambert curled her lips into a faint smile, slowly stood up, holding a jade zither in her arms. The body of the zither was as black as ink, and its tail bore scorch marks. This was the flying stream zither, a musical instrument that resonated deeply with her spirit. Sophie Lambert's gaze was immediately drawn to Diana as she suddenly stood. Upon seeing the flying stream zither in Diana's arms, Sophie's eyes widened in disbelief, her expression filled with shock. Her previously steady breathing grew rapid and uneven. The sound of the flute abruptly ceased. Those who had been immersed in the melodious flute music suddenly opened their eyes. The veins beneath Sophie Lambert's snow-white skin twitched slightly as she finally realized where she was. She had been playing the flute, yet now she had lost her composure because of Diana Lambert. Sophie hurriedly resumed playing, but the flute's sound no longer carried the same agility and clarity it had before. Her mind was filled with unease and resentment. The plan, which had seemed so foolproof, why had it turned out like this? Chapter 15, A Dance That Stirred the Heart, 2. At this moment, Diana Lambert quietly sat down, her slender hand gently stroking her flat stomach. At this very moment, she was still an innocent young girl, unexposed to the harshness of life, but she could still vividly remember the child she had lost. My child, can you see me from the heavens above? This is the first step on your mother's path to revenge. For Sophie Lambert, someone who valued her honor as much as her own life, being humiliated in front of noble ladies, and even the Regent King himself, was a profound disgrace, more painful than any form of torture. What's more, she had already considered the championship title of this competition to be hers, firmly in her grasp. Yet, because of one single action by Diana Lambert, her entire plan had been ruined. The dream of glory, the dream of overnight fame, now seemed to slip further and further away from her. Diana Lambert lowered her eyes, but could still feel Sophie Lambert's venomous gaze. She slightly curled her lips, her eyes glinting with an enigmatic light. Is this all it takes for you to lose your composure? Humph, Sophie Lambert, just you wait. The future awaiting you will be filled with methods 100 times more ruthless. This time, you only lost your honor, but next time, it will be far worse. Diana Lambert's expression suddenly turned icy, catching the attention of the Regent King sitting above. He chuckled softly, gazing into the amber wine in his cup, with a probing look in his eyes. This woman, truly an enigma. Like a mysterious veil that no one could see through, it unexpectedly ignited the desire for conquest in men. The two had no prior connection, yet due to a fleeting curiosity from the Regent King, their futures became as hazy as smoke and mist. On the stage, Sophie Lambert finished playing a flute melody, the music was fragmented and loose. For a long moment, no one responded. Only a sparse scattering of applause broke the silence, a stark contrast to the enthusiastic reception Charlotte Spencer had received earlier. Furious, Sophie Lambert stomped her foot and stormed toward Diana Lambert, her voice seething, "You sabotaged me. At this moment, there was no trace of her former grace or elegance. Diana Lambert's gaze was mocking as she smiled faintly, retorting, "Sabotaged? How exactly?" "I only stood up because I was tired. If you were distracted by external disturbances, you can only blame yourself for being too foolish." Her mocking eyes pierced Sophie Lambert, her tone dripping with sarcasm, and the corners of her lips held a subtle smile. Her soft, sweet voice carried just enough volume for only the two of them to hear. Those gentle words, however, were precisely what stoked the flames of rage within Sophie Lambert. Sophie Lambert glared at her with burning resentment, her beautiful eyes seeming to spit fire. Why wasn't the flying stream zither broken? What did you do in the shadows? Anger and despair over her failed performance nearly consumed her, leaving only a blazing fire of hatred in her heart. The supreme glory she had always dreamed of had now vanished like smoke. In its place were scornful glances from all directions. Wherever she went, there were whispers and pointed fingers. Though she couldn't hear them clearly, she knew they were far from kind words. All of this was caused by the woman standing before her, smiling as brightly as a flower. Sophie Lambert's face twisted, her once painting-like beauty now crumpled in rage. Faced with her accusations, Diana Lambert maintained her elegant and composed smile, gently posing a question that left Sophie Lambert speechless. The flying stream zither has always been in the music room. How could it possibly be broken? Sophie Lambert was at a loss for words, biting back the urge to scream. Rose Carter clearly told me she had cut all the strings. But the sliver of rationality she had left kept her from uttering those words aloud. Her gaze dropped, betraying her inner panic. Whether it was an illusion or not, she felt as if Diana Lambert's smiling eyes carried a faint trace of mockery. That subtle derision only fanned the flames of jealousy burning within her. Her downfall only served to highlight Diana Lambert's radiance. Diana Lambert let out a cold chuckle, her slender, pale fingers brushing against Sophie Lambert's hair. Her hand lingered on the white jade hairpin adorning Sophie's locks. The pin was intricately carved with a pure lotus flower, so lifelike and elegant it seemed otherworldly. To outsiders, this was the picture of two harmonious, affectionate sisters. But the truth was not so. Diana Lambert leaned closer to her, smiling softly. "Could it be that my dear sister has done something shady to be this frightened?" Sophie Lambert trembled, her panic intensifying, her eyes revealing clear terror. She had always been confident that everything was perfectly concealed. The amount of silver she had promised Rose Carter was in the hundreds of taels. Rose Carter would never betray her. Diana Lambert must only be trying to scare her. Sophie Lambert tried to compose herself, but her trembling voice betrayed the fear in her heart. "You're mistaken, sister. I was just feeling a little strange, that's all." She forced a smile. "After all, it has been a long time since I've seen you play the zither. I wonder if your performance later will be as dazzling as it used to be." Diana Lambert smiled without replying. With a swift motion, she yanked the white jade hairpin from Sophie Lambert's hair, pulling along a strand of loose hair. Sophie's once neatly tied-up hair now fell into disarray, making her look utterly disheveled. What are you doing?" Sophie Lambert was both horrified and furious, nearly screaming. But unwilling to let others see her in such a pitiful state, she lowered her voice. Diana Lambert threw the white jade hairpin forcefully to the ground. Her beautiful face turned icy, her gentle demeanor instantly shifting to one of cold sharpness. A chilling aura emanated from her, evoking the image of snowfall in January. The fragile white jade hairpin shattered upon hitting the ground, the crisp sound of its breaking echoing, making Sophie Lambert's heart pound violently. She couldn't help but look up, her expression a mix of panic and resentment. Before she could voice her protest, Diana Lambert scolded her harshly, forcing her to swallow her words. Diana Lambert gently lifted her beautiful eyes, coldly gazing at her opponent with an icy and indifferent demeanor, no longer showing any trace of the weak and easily bullied persona from years past. "Want to bully me? You, Sophie Lambert, are far from capable. If you wish to humiliate me, the outcome will only be making yourself a laughingstock for the world." She cast a contemptuous glance at the broken hairpin shattered into several pieces on the ground, her lips curling into a cold yet noble smile. With someone as despicable as you, resorting to underhanded tricks from the shadows, do you think you are worthy of embodying this pure lotus flower? Sophie Lambert's entire body trembled, but under Diana's icy gaze, she was rendered speechless. At this moment, Sophie Lambert's hair was disheveled, her eyes filled with fear and confusion, completely devoid of her usual pitiful and delicate appearance. Her mind was in utter chaos, and in her terror, she bit down hard on her lower lip, nearly drawing blood. Diana Lambert gave her a nonchalant glance, before turning away coldly, leaving with a sense of ease and satisfaction rising in her heart. A pure and elegant lotus, how could someone as pretentious as Sophie Lambert ever hope to represent it? Wouldn't that be tarnishing the purity of such a flower? Chapter 16, A Stunning Beauty. Her figure was slender yet upright, graceful and elegant, her every gesture exuding a noble demeanor. Once the princess consort of the Regent King, she had always adhered strictly to palace etiquette. To avoid being ridiculed for her martial lineage, known for its rough temperament, Diana Lambert once stayed up countless nights, spending half a month meticulously handwriting thousands of palace regulations. Even now, despite the passage of time, those rules remained deeply ingrained in her mind. A simple turn of her body or wave of her hand radiated an aura of sophistication. Although Evelyn Moore, her stepmother, had spent a fortune hiring palace etiquette instructors to tirelessly teach Sophie Lambert the intricate rules of decorum, hoping Sophie would exude a refined elegance that captivated all eyes, it was all in vain. Now, Diana Lambert, with her natural grace, effortlessly outshone Sophie Lambert's stiff and mechanical movements by 100-fold. Sophie Lambert stood frozen in place, stunned and unable to recover for a long moment. Could this cold, commanding woman truly be the same fragile Diana Lambert she once knew? A wave of panic surged through Sophie's heart. Her disheveled black hair fell forward, partially concealing the venomous resentment in her eyes. Diana Lambert, how dare you humiliate me in front of everyone? I, Sophie Lambert, will never forgive you. As for the target of her malicious curses, Diana Lambert was calmly finding a seat, leisurely watching the performances on stage. The subsequent performances consisted of singing, painting, and calligraphy. These young ladies had been trained from a young age, while their talents weren't earth-shattering, they were pleasing enough to watch and appreciate. They didn't reach the breathtaking heights of Charlotte Spencer nor sink to the embarrassing lows of Sophie Lambert. Instead, they were mediocre, neither outstanding nor terrible. Diana Lambert narrowed her beautiful eyes, her gaze flickering as she began to form some suspicions. As the performance progressed, her hand tightened subtly beneath her sleeve. She could almost hear the rapid pounding of her heart within her chest. Watching as the 34th young lady concluded her performance on stage, Diana Lambert felt her heart momentarily stop. Number 35. The shrill voice of the eunuch startled her. The bold idea that had been lingering in her mind for so long finally took shape at this moment. Diana Lambert blinked, her long, thick lashes quivering slightly, casting a dreamy pink hue over her snow-white face. Her eyes, once as clear as water, now gleamed with a sharp light. Success or failure? Just one word apart, yet two completely different paths. She was the last performer. If she merely sang and played the instrument, no matter how masterful her skills were, it would be difficult to leave a fresh impression, on the contrary, it might even become dull. And she had come here to claim the top position, how could she settle for an ordinary result? At this moment, while the 35th lady was performing, Diana Lambert was being led backstage by her maid to change her attire in preparation for her own performance. From within her sleeve, she retrieved a small, exquisite jade flask, her gaze growing even deeper. This was her secret weapon to secure victory. She reached out and pulled the stopper from the flask. The amber-colored liquid inside shimmered gently, releasing an intoxicatingly sweet aroma. Just a faint whiff was enough to captivate. A serene smile slowly spread across her rosy lips. As the melody concluded, the dulcet tones of the pipa gradually faded into the air. The elegant young lady on the stage gracefully descended, having just performed a renowned piece with subtlety and finesse. The soothing melody compelled onlookers to steal a few more glances at her. At this moment, Diana Lambert, dressed in her silver-white attire, stood quietly backstage. In her arms rested the flying stream zither, exuding an ancient charm and an aura of natural simplicity. The eunuch on the stage announced in a shrill voice, "Number 36. Diana gently lifted her foot, walking with the grace of a blooming lotus, slowly making her way to the stage. Trained since childhood, every step she took was measured, neither ostentatious nor careless. Her slender waist swayed slightly with her steps, while her long gown trailed the floor, outlining her delicate and elegant figure. Every place she passed carried a faint, refreshing fragrance, pure as wild orchids, leaving those around her entranced. She was still clad in her moonlit white ensemble, her beautiful eyes shimmering like the stars, and a charming dimple gracing the corner of her lips. Her mere entrance captivated the hearts of everyone present, drawing all eyes irresistibly toward her. Diana Lambert seemed to have been born with an inexplicable allure. Even though she was the last to appear, she still amazed the entire hall with her serene beauty, akin to a newly bloomed lotus. Her appearance was already stunningly beautiful. However, what drew even more attention was the ethereal aura surrounding her, with eyes as mesmerizing as mist, seemingly capable of seeing through the vicissitudes of life. Wisdom and beauty converged in her, forming a perfect harmony. Alexander Blackwood, who had always remained indifferent while seated at the highest position, suddenly froze the faint smile on his lips. His gaze toward the stage gradually turned fervent. He swirled the glowing glass in his hand with interest before downing the amber liquid inside in one go. All eyes in the hall were irresistibly drawn to the woman in pure white attire standing on the stage. A gentle ray of sunlight fell upon her, casting a sacred glow over her already soft, fair complexion. Diana Lambert let out a soft sigh. The scene before her seemed to overlap with memories of the past, causing her thoughts to drift back in time. Back then, she had been consumed by the sorrow of losing her flying stream zither. Combined with her first encounter with Alexander Blackwood, which had left her heart in disarray, she had played a chaotic melody. Despite years of rigorous practice, her performance had ultimately fallen short of Sophie Lambert's flute, forcing her to accept defeat with regret. But this time, history was destined to be rewritten. Diana Lambert's gaze gradually became as clear as water, as pure as the full moon's light, piercing straight into the depths of one's soul. She placed the flying stream zither, which she had been holding, gently onto the ground, her expression growing solemn. This was her only chance. Reborn solely for revenge, she would never let this precious opportunity slip away. Diana Lambert closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, her unparalleled beauty shone through. She extended her slender, porcelain-white hand, her fingertips resting lightly on the zither strings. With a single thought, her fingers plucked delicately, and a crisp, melodious note echoed, shattering the silence in the hall. The murmured conversations instantly fell silent. On her breathtakingly beautiful face, a sharp glint suddenly appeared, like a sword unsheathed, or the gleam of a blade under the moonlight. The distinctive thrill of settling old scores, the iron-blooded tactics of battlefield conquests, the heroic spirit of galloping horses and clashing weapons, these complex, unfathomable emotions all converged on her stunning visage, exuding an extraordinary beauty that left the world in awe. Today, she would use a single melody to shake the heavens and the earth. The sound of the zither now flowed like a cascading stream. As the first note resonated, it was like thunder roaring across the skies. Alexander Blackwood felt a jolt in his heart, immediately raising his head in disbelief. His hand tightened around the wine cup, his gaze revealing a trace of astonishment. Chapter 17, Ambush on All Sides. This is not just amazement, it is a shock beyond imagination. Diana Lambert, how many more surprises do you have in store for me? The softness and delicate charm typical of a woman are fully embodied in her. Yet, the sharpness and brilliance that ordinary girls do not possess make her even more dazzling. Alexander Blackwood's gaze gradually deepened, like two bottomless abysses reflecting a mysterious light. Each note flowed melodiously and piercingly from Diana Lambert's fingertips. Her movements while playing the instrument were incredibly graceful, her wrist moving flexibly, yet her posture remained as upright as a pine tree, as if her entire being was immersed in the music. The piece she was playing was none other than Ambush from 10 Sides. Those who are well-versed in music are certainly no strangers to this famous pipa melody. This is a classic piece passed down from the Tang dynasty, its fame enduring through the ages. Its powerful and heroic melody has stirred countless hearts. Regardless of age or gender, anyone who hears the resounding notes of this instrument cannot help but be moved. The sound of the pipa resonates deeply, vividly recreating the tragic scene of years past when Xiong Yu, the overlord of Western Chu, was surrounded by enemies. Simply listening to the music evokes a vision of a battlefield engulfed in smoke and fire, war drums pounding, horses galloping, weapons clashing, all blending together in a symphony that rises and falls unpredictably, with a tempo so swift it leaves one breathless. Amazement, that is the first thought in everyone's mind. The seemingly delicate and fragile young woman had chosen such a majestic and intense piece, completely defying all expectations. Compared to the many graceful performances earlier, Diana Lambert's rendition of Ambush from 10 Sides stood out in both depth of meaning and mastery of technique. The melodious notes, alternating between highs and lows, deeply moved the audience. Even Ethan Wright, seated below the stage, couldn't hide his astonishment before breaking into a smile. He had always known Diana Lambert was extraordinary, but he hadn't anticipated that her performance would be this exceptional. Yet what happened next was even more astonishing. As Diana Lambert played, several butterflies fluttered into the courtyard, their vibrant colors adding a touch of beauty to the scene. At the peony banquet, butterflies flying about was not an uncommon sight, but this particular scene grew increasingly mesmerizing. The heroic notes of the pipa seemed to channel all of Diana Lambert's emotions, her inner flame of vengeance burning fiercely. Every note under her fingers was powerful and surging with energy. Amid the majestic and sorrowful melody, one brightly colored butterfly flew closer and closer, eventually dancing around Diana Lambert. Following that butterfly, even more began to gather. One by one, they fluttered endlessly around Diana Lambert. The melodious sound of the zither resonated, and soon, dozens of butterflies danced around Diana Lambert, enveloping the young woman dressed in a pure white gown like moonlight. The entire audience below collectively gasped in admiration. Diana Lambert remained focused on playing her zither, each delicate string under her fingers seeming to dance, producing a cascade of enchanting notes. Her jet-black hair flowed like a waterfall, her snow-white attire gleaming like frost, and the music she played lured the butterflies closer, accentuating her ethereal beauty. The butterflies circled around her, making her appear like a celestial maiden from a painting. Everything unfolded exactly as Diana Lambert had planned. As her fingers quivered lightly, striking the final note, the majestic melody abruptly came to a close, ending with the mournful tune of Xiong Yu, a melody both sorrowful and enchanting, stirring the hearts of all who listened. She exhaled softly, cradling her zither, and gracefully bowed toward the audience, her gesture both humble and exuding gentle elegance. The audience fell into complete silence, seemingly still immersed in the performance they had just witnessed. As the music ceased, the butterflies that had encircled her gradually dispersed, flying further away until they vanished into the sky. Diana Lambert smiled as she looked down at the audience. Amid the countless gazes fixed upon her, she met the eyes of a man, refined and gentle as jade, with handsome features and a tall, elegant figure, who was smiling at her. Their eyes met across the air, and Diana Lambert returned his gaze with a smile of her own. That radiant smile, seen by those below, evoked a different sensation altogether. In the shadows, Sophie Lambert watched the scene before her, her eyes blazing with hatred so intense it seemed almost tangible. The once delicate beauty now appeared like a vengeful demon, shrouded in dark energy. Wretched woman, she snarled through gritted teeth, her heart sinking completely. At this moment, she understood more clearly than ever, after such an outstanding performance, the top position would undoubtedly belong to Diana Lambert. She was utterly unwilling to accept this. But no matter her unwillingness, it remained an unchangeable truth. At this moment, the audience below the stage seemed to awaken, with thunderous applause echoing like tidal waves, surging wave after wave throughout the venue. Sophie Lambert's eyes turned green with envy, wishing she could be the one basking in this boundless glory. On the stage, Diana Lambert caught another gaze filled with intrigue, her body trembling ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly. The owner of that gaze was none other than the Regent King, whose power dominated the great Hien Dynasty. His eyes, sharp like those of a hunting hawk, carried an air of curiosity and scrutiny, staring intently at Diana Lambert as if attempting to unearth countless secrets from her. Diana Lambert skillfully avoided his gaze, offering a graceful smile as she descended the stage, her steps as light and composed as when she first ascended. The entire hall buzzed with murmurs about her outstanding performance. Both the heroic melody of ambush on 10 sides and the graceful fluttering of the butterflies had become the center of attention. Madame Susan approached with a radiant smile. Despite the faint wrinkles on her face, her expression glowed with joy and pride, prompting Diana Lambert to smile softly in return. In an instant, numerous noble ladies surrounded her with questions, all curious about the origin of the butterflies. Yet, Diana Lambert merely smiled without revealing anything. The butterflies encircling her were, of course, not a natural occurrence. She was neither a rare beauty, exuding an alluring fragrance, nor someone with a special physique that attracted insects. The ability to summon butterflies with her performance involved deliberate preparation. Firstly, Madame Marquis Bright's Sun was known for her love of flowers, and her residence was filled with a rich floral aroma, attracting swarms of butterflies and bees. Secondly, before stepping onto the stage, Diana had applied a layer of nectar blended with pollen from 100 different flowers. This intoxicating scent was what drew the butterflies to her. The amount of pollen was carefully measured, so that after her performance ended, the strong floral scent gradually dissipated in the wind, leaving only a faint fragrance on Diana Lambert. While still enchanting, it was no longer potent enough to attract butterflies, which is why they dispersed after her performance concluded. However, it was precisely this calculated effect that made the stage performance all the more mesmerizing. Chapter 18, Renowned across the capital. The sound of the zither lured the butterflies, not naturally occurring, yet it left an indelible mark in everyone's hearts. Countless years later, people still vividly remembered this moment. A peerless beauty, clad in a pristine white gown, played a majestic melody with her jade-like fingers. The music brimmed with vigor and killing intent as hundreds of butterflies danced around her. Her flowing green hair, radiant beauty, and the vibrant wings of the butterflies added to her regal aura. A touch of pride and aloofness flickered in her eyes, leaving everyone in awe and admiration. At this moment, a collective thought arose in everyone's hearts: General Lambert is truly blessed to have such a talented daughter. It was almost as if they could foresee that, within a single night, this young woman would become renowned throughout the capital for her extraordinary performance, turning into the dream of countless admirers. A few crisp claps broke the silence. Seated at the highest position, Alexander Blackwood clapped and laughed heartily. His eagle-sharp eyes gleamed with an endless coldness, but in this instant, the bloodthirsty ferocity was replaced by a sincere smile. Such a melody belongs only to the heavens, how rare it is to hear it in the mortal world. For Lady Lambert, a woman, to produce such a heroic tune, it truly makes me see her in a new light. Diana Lambert lowered her gaze, smiling shyly without revealing her teeth. Little did anyone know that waves were surging in her heart, and her fingertips hidden within her sleeves trembled slightly. From the audience, a voice of praise rang out. Diana turned to see it was the scholar who had recently achieved 3rd place in the imperial examination. He smiled elegantly and remarked, "The piece Ambush from 10 sides was originally a pipa composition, but today, played on the guqin, it not only retains its inherent grandeur, but also gains a layer of sorrow and lament. This instrument is no ordinary one, and neither is the performer." Receiving such extraordinary praise, amidst countless noble women, she was truly one of a kind. Yet, Diana Lambert showed no trace of pride. Instead, she maintained her calm and composed demeanor, her beautiful eyes shimmering like water. Her poise was as unshakable as Mount Tai, remaining unruffled even in the face of collapse. Amidst boundless admiration, she stood tall and unmoved. This composure only deepened everyone's respect for her. In the past, when people learned that Diana Lambert came from a family of generals and was the sole legitimate daughter of a prestigious military lineage, many assumed she had inherited the rough temperament of her warrior father. But witnessing her today, not a trace of crudeness could be found in Diana Lambert. Instead, she exuded the grace of a noble woman from a scholarly family. Her gestures, speech, and even her smile were all impeccably elegant and appropriate. Adding to this was the exquisite melody of Ambush from 10 Sides, which instantly made Diana Lambert stand out amidst the crowd of ordinary beauties. With unparalleled beauty, talent, and grace, how could such a woman not stir hearts? Thunderous applause erupted like tidal waves as Diana Lambert slowly returned to her seat, a dignified and elegant smile blooming on her lips. A deep, gentle voice from a few steps away carried over, a beauty from a family of generals, captivating both the nation and its people. A melody to captivate the world, a dance to enchant the realm. Diana Lambert turned to look, and before her appeared a handsome face, as if descended from the heavens. She responded with a bright, pure smile, tinged with a touch of gentleness, causing the refined young man before her to lower his gaze, suppressing the stirrings in his heart. Much of today's success was owed to the guidance of Master Ethan Wright. The performance of 36 refined young ladies had come to an end. Whether it was playing musical instruments, calligraphy, painting, or singing, every skill displayed left the audience dazzled. Each lady had her own unique charm, some delicate, others more full-figured, making the competitive atmosphere increasingly intense. Diana Lambert sipped her tea thoughtfully, silently acknowledging that this was indeed the Marquis of Bright Sun Manor. Even the tea served to guests was the finest Lucian cloud mist. The tea carried a slight bitterness, yet its rich aroma lingered, spreading gradually across her palate. She narrowed her beautiful eyes slightly, a glimmer of anticipation shining within them. Next came the most important event of today's peony banquet, the selection of the belle of the evening. The glory of being crowned the belle would bring instant fame throughout the capital, elevating her to the status of the most talented woman in the land. Such an honor would bring pride not only to the winner but to her entire family. Whichever young lady earned this title, her parents would undoubtedly feel immense pride. In her past life, hadn't Sophie Lambert gained their father's love and indulgence by becoming the most talented woman of her time? The smile on Diana Lambert's lips faded slightly. She cast a glance at Sophie Lambert, seated beside her. The young girl maintained her usual shy and fragile demeanor, but Diana's gaze held no trace of sympathy. To make Sophie Lambert witness her basking in all the glory, that would be the most fitting punishment for this vain and ambitious girl. Just imagining the scene filled Diana's heart with satisfaction, heightening her anticipation for the upcoming selection. The method of choosing the winner was quite straightforward. The maids brought out a series of glittering treasure chests, each brimming with gold, silver, and gems. A female official explained the rules in concise and simple terms. Gold represents 3 points, silver represents 2 points, and bronze coins represent 1 point. Of course, you may also choose to cast a blank vote. Before Diana, there were 36 small bowls in total, each accompanied by a jade plaque inscribed with the corresponding contestant's name and rank. And so, the talented men and women began casting their votes. Excluding the 36 young ladies participating in the competition, everyone else had the right to vote, both men and women. Each person was given a gold ingot, a silver ingot, and a coin. Thus, the voting results would be relatively fair, making the young ladies more willing to accept the outcome. Everyone exchanged glances. After a moment of bewilderment, someone burst out laughing and said, "I've only ever heard of butterflies flitting through flowers, but who would have thought I'd witness butterflies surrounding people today? Truly astonishing. This gold ingot, I present to the beauty." With a flick of his finger, the gold ingot flew straight into the bowl marked with the number 36. Diana Lambert observed him for a moment, finding his face familiar. Then, noticing Sophie Lambert's expression of gritted teeth and utter resentment, she immediately understood. This refined and polite man was indeed a scholar, none other than the son of the Minister of Revenue, who had accompanied Sophie Lambert here. Just an hour ago, he had been attentive to Sophie Lambert, yet now he had tossed the most valuable gold ingot to Diana Lambert. No wonder Sophie Lambert's eyes burned with fury, her delicate face flushed with indignation as she stomped her feet in frustration, her beautiful features showing clear discontent. Seeing Sophie Lambert so enraged, Diana Lambert felt even more delighted. She glanced at the son of the Minister of Revenue, indeed handsome, elegant, and full of charm. No surprise Sophie Lambert had set her sights on him as her prey. But now, it seemed he no longer had Sophie Lambert in his eyes. Diana Lambert covered her mouth with her handkerchief, letting out a soft laugh. Her cheeks flushed, and her eyes held a playful mix of amusement and reproach, instantly captivating the son of the Minister of Revenue, leaving him utterly spellbound. Chapter 19, The Red and Gold Peony Hairpin. Fox Spirit. Sophie Lambert stood nearby, watching the scene unfold, stomping her foot in anger. Her beautiful face was filled with resentment and jealousy, the usual gentleness swept away by fury, replaced with a ferocious expression. At this moment, she was pointing accusingly at Diana Lambert, completely forgetting how she had once clung to this man herself. Diana Lambert glanced sideways at her, her eyes full of mockery. The man you want to seduce is now kneeling at my feet. How does that make you feel? Back then, when you clung to Alexander Blackwood, did you also feel this smug satisfaction? The more Diana Lambert thought about it, the more her hatred made her clench her teeth. Yet, her face maintained a serene, elegant smile as she attentively observed the performance on stage. The melody of ambush from 10 sides seemed to have captivated countless hearts. Number 36 was receiving an increasing amount of gold and silver, nearly filling her tray to the brim. As the pile of gold and silver grew, the originally exquisite small bowl was no longer enough to hold it all. In contrast, the bowls of the other performers contained only a sparse scattering of coins. Coming in second place after Diana Lambert was Charlotte Spencer, whose bowl held a few silver ingots, but still fell far short of the leader. No matter how spectacular the dance red garment spinning in grace was, it could not compare to the allure of the zither melody guiding the swallow. Talented scholars and beauties flocked forward to cast their votes, among whom Ethan Wright, dressed in snow-white attire, stood out the most. He smiled at Diana Lambert and, without hesitation, placed all 3 of his coins, gold, silver, and copper, into the bowl of number 36. Diana Lambert's heart stirred slightly, but her attention was soon drawn to the man in the pure white robe following behind him. In terms of appearance alone, Ethan Wright was in no way inferior to Alexander Blackwood. Both had thick eyebrows and bright eyes, exuding a refined and handsome demeanor, befitting the title of a jade tree in the wind. However, their temperaments were worlds apart. Ethan Wright was gentle and composed, the epitome of a cultured gentleman. He was like a warm beam of sunlight amidst the chaos of life, pure and unsullied. He brought to mind the phrase, a man of noble character, unparalleled under heaven. A former top scholar in the imperial examination, he excelled in poetry, calligraphy, etiquette, and music. His entire being radiated an elegance akin to a painted masterpiece. Alexander Blackwood, on the other hand, embodied a completely different aura. Years of battling on the front lines, immersed in the bloodshed of war, had forged a cold, ruthless presence within him. He resembled a powerful, agile panther, always poised to strike at the perfect moment. Such a man was both dangerous and irresistibly captivating. And now, this very dangerous, cold man, dressed in an impeccably elegant white outfit, was slowly making his way toward the voting box. Diana Lambert's heart involuntarily tightened. Alexander Blackwood subtly moved his wrist, walking slowly toward the voting area. His cold and commanding aura, combined with his noble status as the Regent King, caused those around him to instinctively step aside, clearing a path for him. The man, indifferent and expressionless, approached the 36th bowl. With a slight flick of his wrist, his index finger gently snapped, sending the coins in his hand flying straight into the bowl from several meters away with perfect precision. His movements were effortlessly elegant. He always stood out like this. Diana Lambert lowered her head, the corners of her lips subtly curling upward. The top position undoubtedly belonged to her. Though she had already anticipated the result, when the eunuch's sharp voice rang out from afar, she still felt a fleeting sense of disbelief. Her gaze shifted slightly downward from the dais. Congratulations to number 36, Miss Diana Lambert of the General Lambert household, for being declared the most outstanding participant of this year's peony banquet. The Marchioness of Bright Sun, her demeanor still graceful and dignified, smiled as she carried forward a tray draped in black fabric. When the fabric was lifted, the golden hairpin on the tray gleamed brilliantly, reflecting the room's lights into dazzling golden rays. The shimmering gold was like the radiant sunlight of March, so breathtaking that every woman present held their breath. The Marchioness's smile grew even more triumphant. This is a precious ruby once presented as tribute from Persia years ago. While rubies are not uncommon, one of this size is truly rare. His Majesty bestowed this ruby upon the Marquis, and the moment I saw it, I thought it would be perfect to carve into a peony. Now it seems I was right, it's absolutely flawless and perfectly suited for Miss Lambert. The rest of her words faded into the background for Diana Lambert. She stared intently at the glittering golden hairpin on the tray before her, her usually composed expression now tinged with awe. A lifelike peony appeared, proudly blooming atop the hairpin. Every petal, every stamen was intricately carved with the utmost precision. Most remarkable of all, the entire peony was sculpted from a single piece of pure ruby, its transparency and brilliance exuding unparalleled value. The vivid red of the peony contrasted with the solid gold of the hairpin, intertwining to create a beauty that captivated all who beheld it. The peony is considered the most elegant flower in the world, a true embodiment of beauty and grace, captivating enough to topple kingdoms. Only ruby could truly capture its noble and majestic allure. Moreover, the shape of this ruby perfectly matches the form of the flower, making the carved peony appear even more natural, with no trace of craftsmanship. Holding it in one's hand, one cannot help but cherish it endlessly. All the women present marveled at the exquisite craftsmanship of the hairpin, their gazes filled with admiration that refused to waver. Madame Marquis Bright Sun also smiled and remarked, "This crimson gold peony hairpin is indeed extraordinarily exquisite. Even I find it difficult to part with." She then softened her tone, her smile gentle. "But gifting it to a beauty like Miss Lambert is a different matter. I am confident that with Miss Lambert's elegance, this hairpin will shine even more brilliantly." With that, she affectionately draped her arm around Diana Lambert and carefully fastened the golden hairpin into her jet-black, cloud-like hair. The already elegant updo, now adorned with the golden pin and the peony, became even more dazzling. The vivid red of the peony reflected against her slightly flushed cheeks, perfectly embodying the phrase "a face as radiant as peach blossoms." Her flawless beauty became even more luminous, indescribably stunning. In that moment, an aura of nobility radiated from Diana Lambert. It was reminiscent of the days when she was the Regent King's consort. Without needing to feign authority, she naturally exuded a commanding presence that compelled everyone in the household to obey her without question. Her clear, water-like eyes glanced down at the crowd below, unsurprised to meet countless admiring gazes. When her eyes landed on Sophie Lambert, whose expression burned with seething hatred, Diana merely smiled faintly. Yet within that smile lay an unmistakable hint of disdain and mockery. At this moment, Diana Lambert had ascended to the status of a peerless woman in the hearts of many. No matter how much resentment Sophie Lambert harbored, she could never hope to surpass her. Today was merely the first step in Diana's path to revenge. Later, countless more brutal acts of revenge awaited Sophie Lambert. Chapter 20, Aunt Evelyn Moore arrives. After the peony banquet, as everyone had anticipated, Diana Lambert's name spread throughout the capital overnight. From royal relatives to common folk, everyone heard the tale of her playing the zither to charm butterflies, marveling at the story and turning it into a legend. Meanwhile, Diana Lambert, the subject of all the buzz, was leisurely seated in her chamber. With a silver needle in hand, she skillfully embroidered intricate patterns, her movements as graceful as a butterfly flitting through a flower garden. "Miss," came the soft call of Ivy Clark from a distance. She lifted the curtain and hurried into the room, her round face alight with joy. "Another invitation has arrived for you. This time, it's from the daughter of the scholar Thomas Bennett, inviting young ladies to gather for poetry and painting." "Decline," Diana Lambert replied without even looking up, her tone calm and indifferent. Though Thomas Bennett holds a modest official rank, he has always been insufferably arrogant and looks down on daughters of military families. Inviting me now, after my prominence at the banquet, is merely a shallow attempt to gain favor. She lowered her head again, focusing on the handkerchief she was embroidering. Ivy Clark pouted. "Miss, ever since the peony banquet, you've been cooped up at home, not stepping foot outside the residence." She muttered in frustration, "If you keep this up, isn't it a waste of such a heaven-sent opportunity? What if people gradually forget about you?" Diana Lambert raised an eyebrow, her red lips curling into a faint smile. "To refuse yet still allure, to advance by retreating, this is the superior strategy. Hastily flaunting oneself would only diminish one's value." Ivy Clark nodded earnestly, as if she had come to a sudden understanding. Seeing the girl still bewildered, Diana Lambert chuckled softly, her voice clear like pearls dropping onto a jade tray. "If I remember correctly, in a few days, it will be the 60th birthday banquet of my maternal grandfather. Appearing then would not only astonish everyone but also show filial piety and respect." The past few days had been spent idly with embroidery and reading, causing Diana Lambert's bright eyes to show a hint of weariness. She set the embroidery in her hands aside, walked to the window, and gazed at the vibrant summer scenery outside. Summer flowers were in full bloom, petals fluttering gently to the ground. The warm breeze carried a hint of heat, brushing against her snow-white skin, leaving a faint rosy hue. Even without makeup, she was as beautiful as a painting. Diana Lambert's gaze lingered on the lush green bamboos outside the window, her eyes sparkling like water. Though her appearance was innocent and pure, it carried an air of calmness and maturity beyond her years. Ivy Clark stood quietly by her side, head bowed, not daring to look directly at the ethereal beauty before her. Since the peony banquet, the young lady seemed to have changed. Even Ivy herself couldn't discern whether this change was for better or worse. The young lady had become more intelligent and quick-witted, but at times, her eyes revealed a fleeting sadness. She would often wake up startled in the middle of the night from nightmares. Every time Ivy looked at her mistress's unparalleled beauty, she couldn't shake the feeling that the young lady might vanish into the wind at any moment. But surely, it was just an illusion. Diana Lambert's gaze flickered with a cold glint. "Has Rose Carter been acting unusual these past days?" Ivy Clark carefully thought back, furrowing her brow slightly before replying slowly. "About 2 days ago, Rose Carter returned from Cloud Serenity Courtyard with a distinct handprint on her face. But no matter how much I asked, she refused to say anything and just cried miserably." Diana Lambert let out a faint laugh, her tone tinged with mockery. "Dogs biting each other, all covered in fur." "Huh?" Ivy Clark widened her eyes, her face filled with disbelief. Diana Lambert let out a long yawn before lazily saying, "That night, Rose Carter sneaked out. In truth, she went to the music room, following Sophie Lambert's orders, intending to sabotage my flying stream zither." "What?" Ivy Clark exclaimed in shock, her face turning red as she gritted her teeth. "That wretched Rose Carter. How dare she commit such a despicable act? Does she not regard her mistress at all?" Diana Lambert wiped away a tear that had escaped during her yawn. When she opened her eyes, her expression had turned cold and icy. "Everyone has their own master. Behind my back, she pledged loyalty to Sophie Lambert. I don't blame her for that. But she didn't anticipate that the flying stream zither would remain unscathed, which is why Sophie Lambert flew into a rage. The injuries on Rose Carter's face were undoubtedly caused by her." "Mistress, your foresight is truly unparalleled," Ivy Clark said with an admiring look. "Unparalleled foresight?" Diana Lambert gave a bitter smile, only feeling a chill in her heart. She had merely lived through a lifetime of betrayal, which allowed her to see people and situations with greater clarity. Between Sophie Lambert and Rose Carter, it ultimately boiled down to a relationship of mutual benefit. Now that Rose Carter had been harshly slapped, it was simply a case of reaping what she had sown. Diana Lambert let out a soft chuckle, her eyes devoid of any sympathy. Beside her, Ivy Clark brought over a small chair and sat down. Unable to suppress her curiosity, she asked, "If Rose Carter harbors such intentions, why does Mistress still keep her by your side?" Keeping a spy close seemed far too risky to her, and she couldn't help but worry about her mistress's safety. A spy, when used properly, can be just as valuable as a loyal subordinate, Diana Lambert said, narrowing her eyes as she gazed into the distance, her fingers lightly tapping the wooden table. The cryptic words left Ivy Clark stunned for a long moment before she hesitantly replied, "Mistress has become harder and harder for this servant to understand lately. But perhaps that's a good thing. At least Mistress won't be deceived by Sophie Lambert's false facade anymore." The cheerful expression of the young maid brought a faint smile to Diana Lambert's lips. So, Sophie Lambert's hypocrisy had become that obvious, hadn't it? It was only her own fault in her past life for being too naive, unable to see through the deceitful mask of that woman. But in this life, she would not make the same mistake again. Diana Lambert continued to tap her fingers lightly on the table, the crisp sound echoing rhythmically, causing her to relax her brows slightly. "Any news from my father?" In her memories, her father, Edward Lambert, had led troops to guard the northern frontier and had been gone for 3 years now. Her mother, left alone day after day, likely spent her nights drowning in tears. The battle with the northern frontier had ended 3 months ago, with the frontier surrendering and agreeing to pay a substantial annual tribute. Despite such a resounding victory, the date of her father's return remained uncertain, surely leaving her mother deeply worried. Diana Lambert's heart suddenly clenched as she blurted out, "Has the general sent any letters?" "He did. He mentioned in his last letter that he had already reached Hangzhou. If traveling by sea, he should be back in about 10 days, Ivy Clark replied with a smile. Diana Lambert gave a slight nod. At that moment, someone outside the door announced, "Madam Evelyn Moore and the third Miss have arrived." "Shall I let them in?" Diana Lambert's pupils contracted briefly before she let out a cold laugh. "Let them in." "Miss," Ivy Clark exclaimed anxiously. "You know very well that the third Miss and Rose Carter harbor ill intentions. Why allow them in?" Diana Lambert gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, sitting upright before the bronze mirror. Her exquisite, otherworldly beauty reflected in the glass, her eyes sparkled with a mischievous glint, and the corners of her lips curved slightly. "I want to see what kind of waves they can stir up in this orchid fragrance pavilion." She cast a sidelong glance at Ivy Clark and instructed, "Today, no matter how much resentment, disdain, or sarcasm you may harbor in your heart, you must endure it. Do not reveal anything in front of Rose Carter. Do not alert the snake in the grass." Ivy Clark quickly lowered her head in acknowledgement. Chapter 21, 4 ounces against 1,000 pounds. Notified by the maidservant, Evelyn Moore led her daughter into the orchid fragrance pavilion. Inside, the elegance blended seamlessly with lavish opulence, making the mother and daughter's eyes light up with amazement. The orchid fragrance pavilion was the boudoir of Diana Lambert, personally constructed by General Edward Lambert. He had only 2 daughters, and for this beloved one, he naturally showered her with boundless affection, offering her nearly all the finest things the world had to offer. It was a delicately designed tower, filled with exotic treasures brought back from his conquests across the lands, including rare royal gifts specially bestowed. Whether it was the grand double doors carved from pear wood or the antique rosewood furniture within, everything caused a flicker of resentment to appear in Sophie Lambert's eyes. Both were daughters of the general's manor, so why did Diana Lambert enjoy all the splendor and luxury, while she, Sophie Lambert, had to share a modest courtyard with her mother? Looking again at the orchid fragrance pavilion, there were countless rough maids, 8 first-class maids, and an uncountable number of others in varying ranks. Meanwhile, Sophie Lambert stood there pitifully, with only two senior maids behind her, a stark contrast. Sophie Lambert clenched her fists tightly, biting her lip in frustration. Standing beside her, Evelyn Moore appeared much calmer, her lips curling into a faint smile. Her beautiful eyes scanned the living room, her entire demeanor exuding a gentle and likable charm. "I wonder when the eldest lady will arrive." Though inquiring, her tone remained modest and approachable, her gestures soft and gracious, instantly winning the favor of the maids in the courtyard. Cora Jade, the close maid of the eldest lady, smiled and pointed toward the rear courtyard. "The lady heard that Madam and the third lady have arrived. She is currently applying her makeup and asks Madam and the young lady to wait for a moment." Evelyn Moore nodded with a smile and waited in the hall with Sophie Lambert. However, after waiting for nearly half an hour without seeing Diana Lambert, Evelyn's expression subtly changed, her eyes reflecting a hint of doubt. After the peony banquet, Sophie had tearfully confided in her, complaining that Diana Lambert had embarrassed her in front of everyone. Initially, Evelyn had been skeptical, but today, with some free time, she decided to meet this eldest lady in person. Now it seemed that Diana was indeed even more challenging to deal with than before. If it weren't for Evelyn Moore holding her back, Sophie Lambert would have stormed off in anger. Her mother had instructed her to apologize to Diana Lambert, something she had already been reluctant to do. Now, with Diana Lambert putting on airs, Sophie grew even more irritated, slumping heavily into a chair with a dark expression. "Why does my dear sister look so unwell? Could it be that you caught a cold at the peony banquet?" A gentle female voice, tinged with amusement, rang out as Diana Lambert entered the hall, supported by Ivy Clark. Listening to Sophie's tearful complaints, Evelyn Moore couldn't help but grow wary, silently assessing the legitimate daughter she had always looked down upon. In the stifling heat of summer, the oppressive atmosphere only added to the discomfort. The women in the household had all switched to lighter, thinner clothing. Today, Diana Lambert wore a long gown made of delicate jade-green gauze. The layered fabric enhanced her ethereal elegance, making her look like a celestial maiden. Though still young, she was already tall and slender, her graceful figure enough to inspire envy. She and Sophie Lambert were only a year apart in age. Sophie still carried a childish charm, while she was already stunningly beautiful, like a pure lotus blooming in the middle of a serene lake, capturing all the springtime beauty of the garden. Her eyes sparkled like autumn waters, her lashes curled like distant mountains, her skin smooth and white as jade, and her lips as red and luscious as a delicate touch of rouge. Every frown, every smile exuded an otherworldly grace. Yet, within Evelyn Moore's gentle gaze, there was a fleeting chill that pierced to the bone. The young woman smiling before her emanated an invisible but intimidating aura. In this household, the one Evelyn feared most was not the matriarch Margaret Rivers, but rather this seemingly frail eldest daughter standing before her. Diana Lambert gracefully approached the main seat, sat down lightly, and smiled at Evelyn Moore. "It is truly an honor for Aunt Evelyn Moore to visit my room today." Having stood in the hall for quite some time, Sophie Lambert's legs were already sore. She pouted, her small face betraying her jealousy toward Diana Lambert. Evelyn Moore silently observed the scene, a trace of regret flashing through her heart. Both were daughters of the Lambert family, yet her own impulsive, thoughtless child paled in comparison to the dignified and virtuous Diana Lambert. As this thought crossed her mind, a sinister glint flickered in her eyes. She had been oppressed by that Margaret Rivers, resigned to the fate of being a concubine. Even though the general adored her deeply, she could never compare to the status of the legitimate wife. A favored concubine was still just a concubine. In the end, she was nothing more than a subordinate wife. She absolutely could not allow her daughter to be overshadowed by Margaret Rivers' daughter. Her thoughts shifted swiftly, and in an instant, a composed and graceful smile blossomed on her still charming face. "I've heard that the eldest young lady has recently been honored as the most talented woman in the capital, so I came to offer my congratulations. I hope the young lady won't take offense." She extended her hand, feigning a casual gesture as she lightly stroked Sophie Lambert's waist. In truth, her fingers pinched Sophie's slender waist harshly, digging in with force and twisting sharply, causing Sophie Lambert to nearly cry out in pain. Sophie Lambert looked at her ever-loving mother in astonishment, her eyes welling up with tears, on the verge of spilling over. Evelyn more quietly withdrew her hand, painted in deep crimson, into her sleeve, maintaining a gentle smile on her face. A few days ago, Sophie came back looking dejected. Today, after asking her a few questions, I found out she had an argument with the eldest lady. Sophie has always been innocent and straightforward, so if she has done anything wrong, I hope the eldest lady can be magnanimous and forgive her. After finishing her words, she feigned a sympathetic expression and supported Sophie Lambert.